And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 2015, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Great Barrington Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so by joining the meeting via Zoom, by computer, and/or by dialing per the instructions on the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. All of our votes will be roll call votes, and we'll start with roll call attendance. Jeremy Ega?
Here.
Sorry, got you with a mouthful, right? Malcolm Fick?
Here.
Jonathan Hankin?
Here.
Pedro Pagano?
Aye.
Garfield Reed?
Here.
Brandy Nelson here. All right, and we've also got Chris Rumbold, our fabulous planner, and Kim Shaw, our fabulous secretary.
Thank you.
First item on our agenda this evening are Form As. I don't believe we have any Form As unless there's been a last minute change, Chris? No change. So moving on, we'll go to our minutes of February 11th, 2021. Do we have a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Second.
Seconded by Malcolm. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Jeremy?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Aye.
Pedro?
Aye.
Brandy? Aye. All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda is the site plan review for 35 West Plain Road, an application from the Berkshire Waldorf School for the construction of 3 outdoor play areas.
So Brandy, I'm going to recuse myself because I am in a butter.
All right, so Jonathan will be recusing himself.
And Josh Fisher from the Waldorf School is on the panel to introduce this to you.
All right, Mr. Fisher, welcome.
Yeah, Brandy, before we start, I'd
Yes.
like to say that my son was at the Waldorf School, but he's no longer there, so I don't believe that my participation presents a conflict.
Okay, thank you for disclosing that. I appreciate that. And Kim, Jonathan has turned off his screen, so he's not participating. All right, Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
do you have a presentation to make?
Basically, we are hoping to build 3 outdoor, we're calling them pavilions. They're kind of very simple wood structures around the early childhood building for shelter from the elements for our younger kids, the kindergarten and pre-kindergarten students. We're doing as much as we possibly can this year outside for obvious reasons, health and safety, COVID reasons. And we've been kind of making do as best we can with some shade sails and other things like that. But we would like to kind of build some more permanent open-sided wood structures for the kids to gather underneath and stay out of the rain, the snow, have their snacks, do circle time, basic, and just have that as an auxiliary part of the playground for these young kids in the outdoors this year.
Okay.
And that's I can answer questions, but I don't know. We're kind of learning here as we go with this process, so that's the idea.
All right, thank you. So board members, in our packets, there are a number of items, one of which being an aerial photo with what appears to be the tax parcel maps showing the location of the 3 structures. This is on the north side of West Plain Road.
You want to, Brandy, if you ever want to see anything on screen, just let me know.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Do you mind placing that on screen just so the board members have it?
Sure.
I have it up on my screen.
Can you see
Yep, we see your screen.
Ariel?
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
and
Were the blue ones we approved earlier this year?
Those were the
Or last
outdoor
year?
classrooms. Yes.
Yes, that is correct. Those are the outdoor canopy classrooms that were approved in the fall and then built.
Right. And so this is additional of the same type of facility? Or?
No, these are different. They'll be rectangular. They won't have this sort of canopy tent-like structure. It's really just a kind of rectangular, one sloped roof, three-sided. Although the sides will be similar in that they're kind of rough sawn lumber siding with gaps in between to allow for airflow. But so it'll essentially still be an outdoor space, just with kind of a basic metal panel roof over the top to provide shelter from rain and snow.
Chris, do you mind going to the packet page? I think it's 34. There's a little architectural rendering of the proposed structures. So Malcolm, they look like little run-in sheds
Yeah,
to
I'm
me.
looking at page 34, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
I see.
And then are you providing any pathways or anything to here, or is there anything underneath these structures as far as like a prepared foundation or like base for beneath the shed?
No, it'll be just we'll probably put wood chips down, bare earth. They will have concrete footings, but it will be either grass or wood chips, basically, and probably wood chips is what we'll end up putting underneath, and just basic short tables for the kids to gather around. But that's the idea.
Okay.
These are little kids, 4 or 5 year olds.
Right. And is there any intention to have light or power run out to these?
No.
Okay. So I would say they're very similar to an agricultural structure.
Yes.
So let me just run through board members to see if anybody's got any questions. Jeremy, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay. Malcolm, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No more.
Pedro, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do not.
Garfield, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do not.
Okay. My only other question is, are you having to clear any vegetation, any trees or anything to install these structures, or are they being placed in areas that are currently open?
Currently open. These are all part of the playground, kind of on the edges of the playgrounds already. So it's space that is already in use by the kids for the playgrounds, and we've picked spots that make sense for kind of what they already do. So it's a pretty simple operation. No trees coming down or anything like that.
Okay, great. So Malcolm, do you happen to be on 10 point?
I have it, yes.
Okay. Do you want to run through our site plan review criteria if there are no further questions from board members?
Sure.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Number 1 is minimize the cut and fill, and the number of removed trees, 6 inches caliper or larger, the length of removed stone walls, the area of wetland vegetation displaced, the extent of stormwater flow increase from the site, soil erosion, and threat of air and water pollution, which doesn't seem to be a factor. No trees. Number 2 is maximize accessibility and pedestrian vehicular safety, both on the site and accessing and exiting the site.
I don't think this is going to change the pedestrian or vehicular circulation, just provide an extra covered space for those students.
Yeah, I mean, the kids are already on that side of the road, right?
Yes, they're already using those playgrounds on both sides of that building on the north side.
Okay, thanks. Number 3 is minimize obstruction of scenic views from publicly accessible locations.
Like there's any impact?
No.
No.
Number 4, minimize visual intrusion by controlling the visibility of parking, storage, or other outdoor service areas viewed from public ways or premises residential used or zoned.
Not applicable.
We could ask Jonathan if this is going to bother him. But. Number 5 is minimize glare from headlights, minimize light glare into the night sky, minimize overspill into adjacent properties.
Not applicable.
The lighting, yep. Number 6, minimize unreasonable departure from the character, materials, and scale of buildings in the vicinity as viewed from public ways and places. I don't think there's any unreasonable departures here.
No.
Number 7, minimize contamination of groundwater from on-site wastewater disposal systems or operations on the premises involving the use, storage, handling, or containment of hazardous substances. No. And number 8, ensure compliance with the provisions of the zoning bylaw, including parking and landscaping.
And there are no requirements for parking or landscaping in this instance. All right, so if there's no further comments or discussion from the board members, we'll entertain a motion to grant site plan approval for 3 covered play areas as shown on the site plan. Do we have,
So moved.
so Pedro moved and Malcolm seconded. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Jeremy,
Aye.
Malcolm,
Aye.
Jonathan, Jonathan's not in. Pedro,
Aye.
Brandy, aye. All right, Mr. Fisher, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you, Josh.
Thanks. Bye.
The next item on our agenda is the continuation of the site plan review for 17 Mahawi Street, and I will be recusing myself on this application.
And Jonathan's back.
Okay.
All right, Malcolm, I'm gonna find the applicant team in the list here. There's Brian Hazelton, Dennis Egan, Brent White. Should all be allowed to talk. Should you need them to?
Malcolm, can I just mention, in case people weren't here last time, that I have filed an appearance of conflict of interest at the town clerk's office.
Okay. And you feel you don't have a conflict of interest?
No, I have no
cause you to
financial
recuse yourself. Has everybody had a chance to review the conditions that were passed by the select board on the special permit?
Yes.
Okay. So the purpose of tonight's agenda item is to do site plan review for this permitted use that is now permitted thanks to the special permits granted by the select board and was the special permit granted last night, Chris?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Okay. So we had deferred site plan review until the special permits were granted, and I think this is the time to go through it. So if the applicant could review with us the highlights of the proposal and any changes that have been made since we looked at this last meeting.
Malcolm, before you get into that, I think you should make it clear what the purpose of site plan review is and what the restrictions are.
Yeah, site plan review is the planning board's opportunity to go through a list of criteria that we just went through for the last applicant and go through those same criteria and identify any conditions that may be appropriate as a result of viewing those. This is not a public hearing. This is a planning board opportunity to provide those. I will reference a letter that we had received about this, and then we'll see where we stand when we go through the items on the site plan review. All right, Jonathan, is that what you're looking for?
And also just make it clear that we cannot deny it. we can only put conditions on.
Yeah, the use has been granted. Special permit has been granted for the use, which we cannot deny. And we can put conditions on it, but those conditions have to be reasonable, given the use. Any other comments before we get started? Okay. Is there somebody from the applicant that would like to speak about? I don't know if there's been any changes or any modifications since we last met, but we'd like to hear about anything that may have come up.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. This is Brent White from White Engineering. Good evening, everybody. As stated in your introduction here, we are pleased to note that we received our 2 special permits from the Select Board as well as the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it sounds like the board has all of those special conditions that were granted as a part of that review in front of you, but we're happy to discuss any particulars. Say a majority of those conditions were associated with respect to the use of vehicles on site, and I personally would actually like to thank the board for actually going through the site plan review criteria as a part of your recommendations on those special permits, as those allowed the applicant and our team to come up with those conditions that we felt would be a best way of ensuring that the applicant would be able to operate on the property while setting conditions that were respectful of the neighborhood and concerns raised by members of the public and the boards through that process. So thank you for having done that. There's nothing as a part of that process that resulted in a change to our site plan, thankfully. But if the board has any other thoughts or questions from when you reviewed the criterion a couple weeks ago, like I said, we're available to answer any questions that you have. But I'm pleased to report that the conditions associated with the special permits were really more controls of the use and operations and material storage on site, really ensuring that any materials used for the business would be stored under cover as compared to materials that the applicant may need for renovations to the home or the construction of the barn or additions to the barn, that those materials would be allowed to be stored outside. Hours of operation, 8:30 to 5:30. No work on the weekend other than work on the house itself. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have, sir.
And Malcolm, it's Chris. I'll just refer the board to the minutes from your last meeting that contained just a few items that you were looking to have some closure on, including the location of the lights. Although actually, I think that was answered. Dumpsters, snow storage, screening of parking area like headlights and noise from adjoining property, screening of the dumpster and pool lighting, if any. So those were a few of the things that you talked about. And of course, you have your own items as well, I'm sure.
Great. Do any of the members have any questions or discussion before we go through the site plan criteria?
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
Brian, the neighbor had talked about you having a wood burning furnace. Can you explain what you're using there?
Yes, Jonathan, thank you for asking. I have a wood stove set up in the lower area of the barn, in which we, when we were using it more often, and occasionally now still, we burn some leftover framing material or clean wood. There is no old debris, painted material, polyurethane, or pressure treated wood ever burned in my stove. I have a degree in biology and am involved in quite a few environmentally focused building groups, and it just doesn't fit with my morals. We have the full surround of masonry materials, and it is legally installed. It is a small wood stove with a metal Bestis double-lined chimney that goes from the first floor through the second floor legally and out the roof.
Okay, so it is a wood stove. It's not one of those freestanding wood furnaces like David Lanoux has or anything.
No, sir. That I'm not. Those are generally hooked up to a boiler or a water pressurized system to put hot water heat through a building, and that is not something I do. If I'm lucky on a cold winter day, I can get this old wood stove to get the building up to 40 degrees, so I don't freeze. So I didn't freeze while I was on my computer. But after the permit for the private office was pulled and we've been able to have heat in the private office, I believe it's only been run about 3 or 4 times since Thanksgiving.
So basically, it's no different than any wood stove that any resident can put in their house.
Sir, you're correct. I guess, in my opinion, I'm lucky to have some leftover material. Once again, kiln-dried material, stone pallets, and an occasional tree limb or two that we've taken off of a client's property that I can get free lumber out of, or free heat out of, excuse me.
Okay.
Okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you.
We have we had a lot of discussion last time that led to the conditions we recommended to the select board, but we received a memo from Mr. David Souls, with some questions and suggestions. I would just like to run through these before we go through the site plan review. He had several suggestions, and I'd just like to run through these now and then see if we want to consider them when we go through the criteria. One of the recommendations was there should be no parking in the front yard. I'm going to wait until we look at the criteria when we discuss that. He says, Brian said Saturday does not need the number of parking spaces. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, Brian. I mean, were you willing, and did you propose to reduce the number of parking spaces that you're going to have?
That was in a discussion saying that how few people come here, but it is the major concerns about the neighbors and residents about me making sure that no one associated with my business ever parks on the road. I would like to keep the option of that open and not to ensure that I have enough parking spaces within the property itself. But if there's discussion about materials of a parking spot or 2 parking spots, then I can consider something like grass pavers or something for 1 or 2 of them. But I would prefer to keep the parking spots there and have the option so snow and cars can fit adequately within the property limits.
Okay, and that was the next item on the letter that you had apparently described the potential use of pavers just as you did now that would allow the grass to grow through.
If you deem it necessary, it does create issues with plowing amongst other things. But if the board would like to suggest a couple of those spots to be done, then I'm willing to consider or accept those recommendations.
The parking is gravel, as is the driveway, right?
That is correct. It's gravel currently. The nice thing about this is Brent White. The parking already exists. We've actually removed about 1,000 square feet of parking and vehicle storage space on the property here. So we're not actually creating any parking. We're reusing what is already in place, and as a part of our commitment to addressing the potential concerns of parking on Mahawi Street, we have wanted to ensure that we had more than sufficient off-street parking on our property to accommodate that. And as Mr. Hazelton just noted, if the board were inclined to say that in order to satisfy that concern, conversion of a couple of spaces in the northwest corner to grass pave or grass on gravel to better address that, I don't think there's any opposition from us. We would just want to be clear that as a part of that process, we are converting the surface of existing demarcated parking spaces, and we're not actually reducing off-street parking on the property with that conversion. So,
Right. And
Can you speak to, are any of the parking spaces within the 15-foot front yard setback?
they are not.
Okay.
yeah,
I do want to say sorry to
No, go ahead.
interrupt,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mr. Fick. I just, I did review the unmasked land records. It does have a previous plot plan for this, and the existing parking that Brent is suggesting, the parking in that plot plan did have parking within that 15 feet in the northwest corner, and Brent has rightfully pulled it off the road that other extra 15 feet to be more compliant and up to date. And that's in book PH and page 53 if anybody would like to reference it.
Thank you. Does anybody have any concerns about runoff or the stormwater flow on the property? Because that seems to me to be the only reason for substituting pavers for gravel.
Pretty flat site.
Could you describe what additional runoff or what has? I think you've increased the amount of permeable space in the property, if that's not mistaken.
This is Brent White. We reduced the amount of parking space, and we did also increase the amount of impervious area with the roofs as a part of the construction of the shed and the additions to the barn. That was part of our requirement for seeking a special permit under the Water Quality Protection Overlay District. And our stormwater management system consists of a gutter system for the shed that's going to go to a subsurface infiltration bed, much like constructed of infiltrators, much like you might see for an on-site septic system. And we've been able to demonstrate that we can handle essentially 2 inches of rainfall over the entire proposed increase of impervious area within that chamber system, and a 100-year, 24-hour event based upon the amount of infiltration. The soils themselves are sand and gravel. We can actually manage the quantity of water that would fall in 24 hours can be infiltrated in approximately 7 hours with the way we've configured that chamber system. And we've also identified proposed stone drywalls around the perimeter of the existing barn, where the roof leaders will be modified as a part of the additions to promote further recharge of water into the ground. And I was pleased to see we were actually complimented by some of the selectmen based on our proposals to positively address stormwater management, reducing the amount of parking area as well as capturing that clean runoff and trying to more directly infiltrate that into the ground.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next item on the list was that a statement that it would be a lot better if all the activity of the crew was concentrated in front of the barn. I'm not sure that we have any authority to determine where your crew works, but you should be aware that that's a concern. And I suspect most of the people would be working in front of the barn as opposed to behind the shed.
Well, Mr. Fick, as some of the conditions imply, the only people that are working here daily for the length of the day are inside the office. There's morning and afternoon drop-ins by site leaders or employees to pick up stuff from the barn or the storage shed, but that is limited. For example, today, I had one guy in for about 20 minutes, so that does not happen. And that's a low day for certain, but it does not happen frequently.
Malcolm, this is Chris. It might be useful, to there was the comment about, trying to keep the construction yard, contractor yard activity within one area, but it might be useful to the board and to folks listening to understand how this proposed shed works, where the doors to it will be, both for vehicles and for people. Will open doors or windows facing the rear property line? The barn is so close to the rear property line, or open doors and windows on the new shed against the west property. Will those sorts of things have noise, odor, other impacts? So maybe we could have them explain a little bit about the operations within those structures and how people are coming and going and using them.
The intention is the first floor, the west side of the first floor of the existing barn will have a garage door as well as a man door for employees to enter and pick up hand tools that are stored on the lower level of the barn. There will be stairs inside the northeast corner of the existing barn to go up to the second level, as well as the outside stairs that select in small amounts of materials that should stay dry and conditioned. For example, maybe a small packet of leftover flooring or something would be stored upstairs. And they would be either brought up those stairs interior if it's small enough, or exterior if it's too large to go through the building itself. For example, sometimes we have a 12-footer that, going up an exterior stairwell would be easier than the interior. The storage shed itself, we are intending to put ladders and scaffolding and maybe wheelbarrows, things of that nature. And we do hold on to some pressure treated 2x12s used for concrete forms, that when those items are needed on a job site, they would be picked up and brought on job site, and then in X number of days, 3 to 5 days, or when they're being done, used on job sites, they would be brought back into the shed itself. The shed is also can house trailers overnight. If I was to revamp a carpenter's on-site office or trailer, we call it an office, but it holds the tools necessary to build a house. And sometimes if we're doing finish work, we might have to put, for example, a planer or a couple routers in it. So we would pull it into the shed and put those couple tools from the barn into the shed. And then the hope is that I don't imagine those trailers there very often. They if they're on my property, then they aren't making money where they need to be. So we would also use that as secondary parking for the now 2 company vehicles on site that would be parked out of snow or something like that. I think the loudest thing or worst thing is we do eventually will be getting a snow blower that would be pulled out and used for snow blowing or something. That's the extent of it. That those types of materials generally get moved and brought, like I said, brought back within a few days. And they're loaded within a half an hour and unloaded within a half an hour. But it's for those types of things that take up too much space in a finished enclosed building.
And Brian, this is Chris again. I see the elevations of the proposed shed. The west elevation shows just one man door at the far south of it, and the rear elevation shows no windows or doors. And then in terms of the back of the barn, there aren't any windows or doors. Is that true? In other words, will loud activity, contractors yard activity be taking place west or south of the shed or barn?
Well, first of all, as far as the building permit, I'm gonna have to put in a 2-hour firewall because we're so close. So we're doing a Roxel and 1 inch thick on each interior and exterior layer of sheetrock, which will be a solid sound attenuation barrier from the barn to the back southern the southern property line. And the back of the shed does not have any fenestrations through it. I did in the initial drawing of the shed think that I might want to get out of the shed in the back somewhere, and felt that the southwest corner on the west wall was the most, the least, or the spot where it would cause least noise or problems. But I am more than happy to close that fenestration up as well and only have the fenestration facing the road, and then 1 or 2 facing the barn itself, either a man door or a larger access door, in order to easily put some of these things like scaffolding and stuff through, rather than having to take them in and out of a man door, for access, basically.
Thank you.
So you said the south.
Brian,
You said the southwest corner. Did you mean the southeast? Is it?
No. Well, the southeast, I think, it would be facing the barn,
Right.
and I don't think personally, I think that that's my building facing my building. So I thought that would be very acceptable. But I do believe that the southwest corner fenestration has become a concern, and it's not necessary for my function of business. It was, to get to that side of the yard, if so be it. But I would like the ability, obviously, to have fenestrations on the east and the north side of the building, to have functionality to the building itself. It is long and narrow to be within the setbacks and right. And, for example, if I had scaffolding and ladders in the back and one of my trailers overnight in the front, I'd like to be able to circumvent through in a reasonable manner.
So there's no reason why you can't have that door on the southeast side, though, right?
The southeast or the southwest, sir?
The southeast, because it's currently drawn on the southwest, right?
Oh, yes, sir. Like I would put it. I think in my plan view that I've prepared the drawings for the building inspectors, there may be one on each, and like you said, I can definitely, I would hope that I could keep the one on the southeast and give up the southwest very easily.
I mean, it seems to me that if you had some windows on the west side, that would make it less industrial seeming and might be more friendly to the neighbor.
I definitely hear you on that, and then I'm concerned about windows allowing sound through more than a wooden facade. But if there's some suggestions about some fenestrations being put in, I think that what I would be suggesting is to put in maybe some of the reclaimed windows from the barn itself and move them over there. The shed, which is not fully apparent at this point, is it's up on piers, so there's no true foundation underneath it. So I wasn't going to go through the lengths of putting windows in, but if it's an aesthetic recommendation by the board, then I will consider it, or comply.
Well, aside from being aesthetic, I think it'd be functional for you to have some daylight in that building at the rear of it, right? It'd be pretty dark if you don't have any administration.
It would, sir. I just, you know, in full disclosure, I'm sure the board members can understand that I'm concerned about noise and bothering the neighbors. So I feel like it's a bit of a catch-22 to put windows in for maybe lights in the barn to shine through those windows or noise to travel through them. But if it's something that, like I said, I did not draw them originally with not the intention of making it more industrial, but with the intention of being more respectful, and a different view is more than welcomed.
I appreciate your respect towards me, but calling me sir is definitely not necessary, Brian. I'm going to call you Brian. You can call me Pedro.
Right. Thank you, Pedro.
There were several comments in this in the note about the shed, and one of them has to do with request that the shed door face. I think it's the shed door. It says shift garage door facing east. I don't know if you have. Which way do you have the shed?
That I think is going to be problematic. This is Brent. We have the main overhead door facing Mahawi Street, which most garages face the public way here. And as Brian alluded to earlier, the design of the building is to allow the length of the trailer to maneuver into the building to be able on the long side. If we were to have our overhead doors coming from the east, that would eliminate the function of the shed itself here. So unfortunately, that's not something that we have a great deal of flexibility with. And I think Brian had indicated the idea of the personnel doors on the east side for more access to get to the rear if he has materials back there. But relocating the overhead door to the east side is not going to be practical for Mr. Hazelton.
Another item had to do with a suggestion of using automated doors on the barn and the shed. Has that been something that was discussed at all?
I think that's a bit of an elaborate extra done on a lot of doors. I don't see the reason that I would have an automatic door coming up. There's no requirement by any commercial standards that you need an automatic door opener to go in and out of. And if it was to, you open the door to get the storage items out of, and then you shut the door when you're done.
I think that speaks to the volume of times that door would actually be open. I think there was a reference to a tire service that has those, and that's I haven't done a traffic study, but probably hundreds of vehicles in and out for that, and the noise that's associated with those operations here. The fact that we've discussed with the select board that there will not be actual manufacturing on site or within this building here, that it's just purely dry storage. It would be our suggestion that that would be, as Mr. Hazelton noted, a little overkill for the frequency for which that door would be opened.
And then the last item was one that actually bothered me in the plan, is that we have a 50-foot face, uninterrupted face on the on that west side of the shed. And I think maybe one of the suggestions for windows was to address that issue. But I wonder if any of the board members have any concerns about that, or any.
There were also thoughts about plantings there, I think.
Well, the plantings were particularly for the parking, which we brought up at our last meeting, and that will fall into one of the criteria, I think, for site plan.
I'm happy to discuss that now if the board would like.
I'd like to know if there are any comments from the members in terms of
please.
Any concerns about the 50-foot shed face facing the western.
Well, I think Brian raised some good points about why it's not necessarily a good idea, but it would be nice if he had, it seems like he's reached out to the neighbor, and if the neighbor would prefer that, it'd be nice if he could come to some accommodation.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that we need to impose on it.
Okay.
I mean,
Can I just say one thing, which may not be completely clear, but in the plan, when you look up close, there's a long stretch of hemlocks, and then the neighbor's shed, which goes, I believe, at 40 or so feet of that whole thing. So as of right now, that side of the shed is completely covered by hemlocks and a structure in the neighbor's property as well, only sticking out a small percentage of the entire building in really view from the neighbor's property.
Malcolm, if you want to see any on screen, just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay.
Page 43 of the packet. I don't know what page that is. That's the site plan.
Can you see this?
Yep.
Yep.
So Mr. Hazelton was just referencing, if you can see my cursor, this back half of the shed, this is the property line, and there's hemlocks there and a neighbor's shed there. So that's what Brian was just talking about in this location.
I have a question.
Yep.
I mean, is there anything? Could that western side of the shed just be completely non-functional, just decorative to make it look like a residential building, meaning windows but not actual windows? And like maybe window boxes but not actual window boxes, that it could on that side look like a residential building and be?
You don't think it has enough screening already to the neighbors?
Well, no, but I mean above. I mean, it's going to take a while for it to thicken, right?
To do what?
It's going to take a while for the hemlock to grow, right?
I think there's a
No, the
row
hemlock
there,
is
8
20
inches.
feet.
The hemlocks
They're
are
already there again.
They're already there.
Yeah, they're 8-inch calipers, what it says in the plan. And then there's a 14-inch
Okay.
maple
I
tree.
mean, I think you're going to see through some of it. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're really, there seem to be a lot of concerns with how to make it look more residential and less commercial. So that's mainly what I was trying to address.
Yeah, that seems to me that gets away from the needing the trade-off between noise and.
No, but I'm not saying actual windows. I'm not saying there's.
I'm saying that seems to be reasonable.
I'm just saying putting stuff on the exterior, but not going through. So
But between the shed and the hemlocks, I'm not sure that it's even visible.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can get Railroad Street Youth to come in and do some graffiti.
Yeah, I was thinking a mural on the side of that
Well,
one.
mural would be good.
I'd be happy to. I have 2 children and an artist wife that would be happy to do that.
That would be fun.
Well, I think that's it bears a discussion with the neighbor whether they want noise or the window look, but you might want to also raise the issue of artwork.
Yep, and to be quite honest, I'm more than happy and to discuss things with the neighbor and not waste your guys' time with it. One of the other reasons, just so you guys know, we have picks and ladders that range up to 22 feet in length. So we were hoping to have hooks on that wall in order to hang those things. So, I'm hoping to have 20-foot sections of the wall at least to be able to hang the picks and the ladders and use this building functionally and really ensure that I can keep the yard and the entire property looking more like a residence than a business. And I felt that that was one of the main keys of it, as well as noise. That I rightfully suggested that I'll take all my heavy machinery and noisy things out of there in order to not disturb anybody. But if Mr. Souls and Mr. Torres would like to discuss reusing some of the antique windows that are coming out of the barn in the southern wall, then I know a carpenter that can help me with that.
Mr. Souls references some, American building standard throughout the United States, and last I checked, most of this type of suburban development across the United States have garages that face directly onto the street. So I would not characterize these big garage doors facing the street as being out of character with this type of residential development.
Was that the concern, or was the activity when the doors are open, the loading and unloading, that he was
both.
more interested on getting to the side of the building?
I think it was both.
Okay.
Malcolm, a few hands raised if you would like to recognize them or
Well, the last item on the letter, which I'm finishing up here, is dealt with enforcement, and the question was a universal question: is how do we ensure enforcement of conditions? And the answer to that is, does anybody have an answer to that?
Yeah, we need to get a consortium of the town citizens who are concerned about this issue to start petitions and to start protesting in front of town hall to get the selectmen to address this issue, because for me it's a serious issue.
Yeah, we don't have an answer to that. So that's really not our responsibility, is the enforcement. And we do have some questions of our own in terms of some of the conditions that we put on things, but we will continue to follow up on that issue.
Yeah, if this board has specific conditions in its site plan approval, this board can, set a review of those conditions 6 months, a year from now. But if they're conditions of the special permit, that's left to the select board and then to staff through the building inspector's office. But
right. And we're not in the enforcement business. I mean, we're expecting the building inspector, for example, if the lights are not properly aligned or things like that, which has been an ongoing problem. We can take.
Malcolm, I had a couple of questions still. Is that okay? So going back to the parking area, I know last time there was some discussion about how the surface has been compacted, and I know they're working on some areas of that. But where did that land with them? Are they? Is there anything in place so that, or can something be put in place for when that compacts further in the future after what they do? Because there did seem to be some concern about the pooling of water. I know it's really flat, but with the pooling of water and potentially running off.
But there's an asphalt surface under this gravel now.
Yeah, I thought they were taking that. I thought they were going to take that up.
They're going to remove it. Yes.
And but still, there was a concern with as time goes by and vehicles going in and out with the compaction of what they're putting down. And
I believe what we suggested with respect to that was as we work in the southern portion of the parking area where we meet the face of the barn, we already have work proposed. First off, we're installing 2 stone dry wells in that area. So one, some of that surface water may migrate towards those dry wells, but also on the southeast corner where the proposed in-ground pool will be was going to be a dry laid stone patio with a crushed stone base. So really with some very fine grading, we think we can actually direct some of that water and have that patio really serve as more of a method for infiltration to eliminate. Admittedly, that's going to be the primary area where Mr. Hazelton's family, where his employees and where potentially customers may park and come. So he certainly has every incentive of minimizing any water pooling here. But in our view, with what we've done to manage roof runoff in a more controlled fashion and reducing the driveway surface overall, we reduced the amount of potential runoff there is in that parking area. And with the stone dry wells and the patio around the pool, provide greater opportunities for that water to infiltrate directly in the ground and not pool on the actual driving surface.
Brent, this is Chris. When you install the infiltration chambers under the parking lot and to the north of the proposed long shed, the typical section that you've provided for the chambers has the chambers buried, compact fill, and asphalt on top of that. I assume that's not the installation you'll choose here. How will you backfill over the infiltration chambers in this space?
We intend to backfill just as that detail calls, except for in the areas where we have the gravel parking, that will remain a gravel service. That's a detail that came directly from the manufacturer in an effort to ensure that we wouldn't void any warranty that we would have of buying those products. We need to ensure that we provide the proper structural backfill, which is really in the stone, not the actual pavement and the surface of itself. So
no asphalt on top.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
Brent, somewhere in here I read that you're increasing the pervious by 10%. So is that it? So I'm going to assume that the 10% comes from all the asphalt you're removing, given the addition and the shed. Is that right?
That is correct. But we do have a net increase between the pool and the roof areas of the additions and the shed. That's what triggered us to exceed that 15% of the lot being impervious and the need for the water quality permit.
Right. Got it.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any other members with questions?
And so I guess the other thing is that we didn't address is like street, the north facing screening. It seemed like the letter that we received was going in something, it didn't really state it, but something in that direction.
I actually had a couple of comments to go back to some questions that dovetail into some questions that Chris had earlier that were associated with this, as well as what you just raised. With regards to the parking area screening, I believe it was discussed with the planning board, certainly, that along Mahavy Street, that the proposed fruit trees, the way that we've spaced those was really intended to provide more of a visual screen along the entire frontage. We thought that those trees were more valuable along the front, and we had also noted that there's likely a great consideration for a raised planting bed between the parking area and the west boundary. We had received some feedback prior to our first appearance before you with the desire to have certain areas remain open and to do that with more trees or shrubs, or that the planting bed would serve as the visual screen. As we received the correspondence today, and we would have this discussion this evening, we certainly want to screen that parking area. And it's our intention to be good neighbors and find a solution that tries to keep as much of a residential character as we can here. But admittedly, I also trying to ensure my client doesn't set himself up for a position where he's now creating an enforcement concern or issue. Admittedly, I would say I have some concern about proposing simply vegetation along the western property boundary, only for the fact of whether we do arborvitae or deciduous trees, coniferous trees, whatever we have. With a vegetative screen, there's still the potential opportunity for a brake light or a headlight to possibly shine to the west. So admittedly, as the more we thought about this as a team here, we're of the opinion, frankly, that a solid fence might be more beneficial to the applicant and to the neighbor to ensure that we're able to positively control any headlights that might migrate in the east-west direction to our abutter to the west. With respect to the pool, we're not proposing any pool lights for there, and for the dumpster, we'll only have a temporary dumpster while construction and renovations occur, but there are no long-term plans for a dumpster on the property, so there will be no need for an enclosure or screening of a dumpster on a long-term basis.
I will say to that, at present moment, we do have a very small dumpster that's picked up by a garbage truck, once a week on Mondays. And it's I think a 1 yard, maybe it's a half yard. I think it's a 1 yard dumpster. If that's deemed to be like a true dumpster and need dumpster screening, then we eliminate that and turn it into recycling bins and garbage bin pickup as a residential house.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board members? We have a couple of people with hands up, and I just want to remind people that this is a site plan review. We're not discussing usage here or permitting the usage. We're discussing the issues that are brought up in the bylaws under site plan review. So we welcome any comments and brief comments about that. We have a full agenda today, and although we're not required to take comments from the public at this point, I'd like to make sure that we've considered all the considerations. So if someone has something to say to the point, I welcome that.
Malcolm, can you see the attendees list?
Yeah, Eileen Mooney is first up, I think. Could you, Eileen, comment?
Eileen, do you also need your phone? You should be able to try it now, Eileen.
Okay. I wondered what a man door is. Never heard the term before.
It's an architectural term, meaning it's not an overhead door. It's a regular door.
It's a person door.
For person.
It's not gender specific.
Thank you.
White landowning individuals, white male landowning individuals.
Okay, Mr. Souls, you have comments on how I butchered your, not too badly, I hope.
Hi, no, thank you very much. I really respect, I really thank you all for the extraordinary respect that you've shown to, including Brian and all the members of the planning board and Chris Rembold. I'm really, really pleased at the way that you guys are considering everything. And I can explain and respond to a couple of things. I might go for the easy ones first. Thank you for addressing the enforcement. I appreciate that's not something that we need to focus on. I hope it's not a concern, and that one's easy to dispense with. A couple of thoughts. I really agree with Brian that the existing vegetation and or some sort of replacement that we can agree on, i.e. a landscaping boundary to the west, which is basically my backyard or our backyard as a family, would be preferred. Landscaping preferred to the festoonment of that side of the building. I will say I would draw to everybody's attention a really cool comparable building that I've staked out, which is behind the Mission House on Main Street in Stockbridge, the historic site that's run by the Trust. And there's a very interesting horse barn at the back of the property. You have to go off of Main Street, just to the left of the Institute, if you're looking at the Austin Riggs Institute, and you go a few houses further along, and then turn on the side street, you can see this. It's a very, very fascinating structure. Maybe Brian and I can go over and take a look at it, because it does the same thing that I think this 50-foot shed will do, and it does it very, very successfully. Sometimes people have buildings like that for purposes like this, or even for something like a pool cabana or something, and they don't have to be bad. I think part of what that one has going for it is some interesting closed up old historic doors and stuff like that. But we don't need to get into the details of it. It's just the point is this can be, happily resolved, I'm sure. And I really appreciate everybody's input on it. One thing specifically that I would like to say about the shed that I did not understand before is that it's on piers. And so that completely changes everything, because I was picturing it as a big cement structure that would be, the equivalent of a 5-car garage. And I was anticipating echoes and different sets of possibilities. If it's actually a wood frame structure in its entirety, it gives me a completely different take on things in a positive and beneficial way. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody that I'm still catching up, and I appreciate that distinction. Also, just to explain, I think, Jeremy, if I can just refer to everybody by first name, you really nailed it with my concerns about the garage door to the north. And Pedro, I can explain to you what I mean about property layouts in a minute, because it's an interesting point, but maybe less important to me than the question of the door. If the garage door, so to speak, faces towards Mahawi Street, it's very visible. And Pedro, I completely agree with you that that's normal. But it's 50 feet deep. And so without emphasizing that too much, I mean, we all need to know what we're talking about. A normal garage is probably only like 20 or 22 feet deep. And I'm asking because it's such an active place on our property as well. We have the main entrance to our house facing right there. And I'm wondering if by shifting it to the east front, if Brian would consider maybe using a barn door that slides open on the east front instead of an overhead, which I understand the relationship between, the way the roof structure works is critical, and you can't just put, an overhead door. But if there were the flexibility to flip that access point to the east side, then he'd have an L shape of access points, starting with the barn that exists and now adding the side wall of the new shed. And there could be some efficiency of communications and activities. I think it would improve the appearance from the street because it would de-emphasize the active nature of the building. And, something could be done to make it look good along the lines of what people were suggesting, windows and window boxes or landscaping, whatever. So it was intended as a constructive question, and it is motivated by the fact that that's sort of the main thing that we see from our house. It's just where there's a basketball hoop now is pretty much what we look out at all day long. And it will be changing a lot if it's the place where the pickup backs up to collect the trailers and take them away. If it flips to the other side facing east and gives Brian an L-shaped workspace for going into and out of the barn and the shed, it would completely alter, I think, the way that's experienced. Now, just to pick up the one point about what I love about Mahawi Street and what I meant about the way streets are laid out typically in America, it's got the street wall of all the gabled residences from 100 years ago, and even the chiropractor's office, which is a much newer building, the Little Cape Cod house to the left of Brian's house, which functions as an office. They tuck all the cars in the back, and it's really only the first 2 of the 5 spaces that match up with my concern. I think it would just be wonderful if the open sweep of lawn and or other green things is maintained, because I think that's really what the street does for the town, and it's what we all do for one another as neighbors. And in Saturday's conversation with Brian, he had said that he wanted to make it into a vegetable garden. And I have to say, Mr. White, I take exception to the statement that the cars are going to be parked in exactly the same place where they are now. They're not. If you look at the 5 spaces that are indicated on the plan, the headlights of the cars would be immediately adjoining my driveway in the new scheme, and they're 20 or 30 feet away at present. There's a kind of a split rail fence that goes up and creates a sort of a fictional boundary between our properties. People misread that I own the big lawn that's Brian's, but the point is, there's no dispute about the actual property line. What I'm saying is just that it really would be coming a lot closer to me. You're talking about turning that lawn into 5 parking spaces, and I'm against that. I think it would be beneficial to see a real vegetable garden, not raised beds, which can be considerably unattractive, especially in the winter months, and could be very attractive if it's planted in the earth. And if that space seems to be a part of what is the neighborhood's history as a street wall of residences with front yards, even if planted as a vegetable garden. So those are my points. I'm very, very encouraged. Thank you all very much, and I hope my comments have been clarifying as opposed to introducing more confusion.
Thank you. Mr. Kernan has his hand up. You were muted. There you go.
Hello there?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm getting better at this. Thank you all. Michael Kernan, 12 Mahaley Street. And I too appreciate this discussion this evening because I had a whole bunch of questions about site plan approval, and some of them have been answered. So I'll try to diminish my notes here. But talk about zoning bylaw, section 10.5.2, section 1, requires site plan approval, quote, prior to the commencement of any activity, close quote. In the application, we have the omission that a contractor's yard has been in place. The bylaw continues that, quote, no building permit shall be issued by the building inspector without the written approval of the site plan, close quotes. I remind you all, the building permit was issued.
Excuse me, Mr. Kernan, we're doing site plan review here. Do you have any comments on the specific issues?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Zone bylaw section 10.5.3, parens 3, I request that the planning board require a traffic impact assessment. And part of that is at the western end of Mahaley Street, there's a town sign stating weight limit 2.5 tons. I've seen a dump truck, road paver, front end loader, back end loader, and trailer trucks used to transport such construction machines. How are we going to continue with violating the town's own traffic laws? We have to assume that all of these vehicles are over 2.5 tons, 5,000 pounds. Now, on the approval aspect, 10.5.5, I think, number 1 directs any applicant to, quote, minimize the number of removed trees 6-inch caliber or larger, close quote. However, this plan proposes to demolish 5 mature maple trees. The plan calls them, quote, invasive and hazardous trees, close quote. In the same section, there is, quote, minimize soil erosion, close quote, and that's another objective. In addition to the constant trucks moving in and out of the yard, the grassy land in front of the barn, almost the whole section, and the grassy land behind the main house have been gravel filled and tamped down, including specifically with 2 road pavers. There's been a tremendous increase in the amount of impervious soil on the property, well past the 15% maximum. Now, the building permit allows a porch, the legal building permit, allows a porch on the barn to be 5 by 6 feet. To me, it looks like it's much larger than that, and if I ask for an inspection by the board or some responsible authority. I hope that the board has looked at all the evidence we've submitted to the select board and the ZBA prior. There were some conditions imposed, but I agree with some commentators here. The problem is enforcement. There has been none. There's been a contractor's yard being operated for years now. There's other violations going on, and that is a grave concern. I would like to see these issuance of the site plan contingent on these. And I have a question. I don't have it in front of me. Condition number 10. Would you be kind enough to read that to me? Because my first impression was that was like almost a get out of jail free card, which you could do anything. Condition 10 imposed by the select board, I believe.
That's it's a condition of the select board, Malcolm. It's not the planning board.
I saw that, and it seems reasonable to me. That's the any materials that are construction oriented for construction on the site.
Oh, does it say that? Okay, I don't have it in front of me. Anyone does, would they kindly read it?
It says these conditions do not apply to the materials, trucks, or deliveries associated with the proposed or future permitted building and site improvements. So the conditions will not apply when he builds his shed.
And will not, okay, but they still would apply for the operation of the contractor's yard.
Correct.
Okay, I thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Now, can I say a couple things?
Please.
I'd like to respond to Ms. Kernan on 3 points, or 2 points in particular. First is that I believe that the whole purpose of this discussion and this application is partially to clarify the fact that Mr. Hazelton, who has admitted to running a contractor's yard without knowing it, part of this discussion is to clear that up. So to come before us and accuse Mr. Hazelton of doing something illegal is just fine, but he also has to recognize that Mr. Hazelton has acknowledged that he was ignorant of the bylaw. The next thing is I would advise Mr. Kernan to read, 10.3.3. Is that what it is? 10.5.3. Anyway, the point 3, the traffic impact, it says we can request a traffic study for projects that propose 30 or more parking spaces, for projects that are expected to generate 100 trip ends or more per day, or projects that are fronting on the numbered highway. So according to the bylaw, I don't see how we could request that. Am I wrong there, Chris?
The planning board could request a traffic study. Certainly, those are some triggers where you should request it, but you could request it for anything where you felt it might be warranted. Those are some guidelines.
Well, if those are the guidelines, I mean, I would say it's not really warranted here.
Well, let's discuss that. Let's get through the site plan review, and then when we get to discussing traffic, we can discuss. I think we've discussed a lot of issues now. If we go through down the site plan review items, we can bring out some of these items. Anybody object to that?
No.
Okay. So number 1 is minimizing the volume of cut and fill, the number of removed trees, 6 inches caliper or larger, the length of removed stone walls, the area of wetland vegetation displaced, the extent of stormwater flow increase from the site, soil erosion, and the threat of air and water pollution. And the issue that was raised had to do with, by Mr. Kernan, had to do with tree removal, and I believe that those were Norway maples that they were removing, which are deemed to be invasive, but I'm not 100% of that.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's true, and they're dangerous.
Yeah.
The town has in fact removed 3 of them since I've lived here, so I think they're warranted to be removed.
As far as the stormwater flow increase, I think they have addressed that with the site plan in terms of stormwater plan. I feel comfortable with that. Anybody have any questions about that?
No, and I mean, I would invite Brett to talk again about how much more this site now will be able to.
Well, I think we've gone through
to drain out of it than it currently does. So, well, just for Mr. Kernan's.
Well, I think at this point we need to discuss through these things and determine whether we want to impose any conditions at this point on the if we approve the site plan.
Understood.
Number 2, maximize accessibility and pedestrian vehicular safety, both on the site and accessing and exiting the site.
I don't think there are any issues there.
Okay. Anybody have a concern? No. Number 3, minimize obstruction of scenic views from publicly accessible locations. I don't think there's an issue with.
I'm not aware of any scenic views on my area.
Yeah, maybe street scenic views there. Number 4 is minimize visual intrusion by controlling the visibility of parking, storage, and other outdoor service areas viewed from public ways or premises residentially used or zoned. I do have.
Can I?
One thing that I would.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
One thing that I would suggest there is that there be a condition that there be no raw materials stored in any of the setbacks. So you don't want to have pallets of stone or what have you in the 10-foot side yard setback.
How about, Brian said the small dumpster that he has now, he could replace, but I wonder if we want to put a condition that if there is a dumpster on site, it needs to be screened.
Even the small dumpster?
Yeah, I would think. Anybody have any comments about that?
I don't think it's a major concern. If he's doing work there, the dumpster's not going to get any larger when he stops doing work.
But it sounded like are we talking about the one yard? Is it a 1 yard dumpster? Yeah. It sounded like that was not because of the work. Is that not the case? It sounded like that was going to stay.
It sounded like he had an option of replacing it with trash and recycle bins. But
it sounded like he'd be willing to do that, but it sounded like it was going to stay if it wasn't a concern.
Okay. I mean, I don't even know where it is or whether it's visible from the road. Okay, it's not a concern.
Well, I'm not understanding. What I'm understanding is that there's going to be a dumpster there during construction, and then it's going to be removed. Is there a second dumpster? I don't see it on the site plan anywhere.
I thought there was a 1 yard dumpster there. And if we needed to, basically, he would replace it with recycling stuff. He'd be amenable to doing something like that. I don't know if there is another dumpster, but I know he says there's just that about a 1 yard size dumpster that he uses like anybody else uses the garbage.
Can we get either Brent or Brian to answer?
I can.
Sure, we don't want to.
I can. Yeah.
Please, Brian.
Right now, I have a 1 yard dumpster on the property. There's been a 1 yard dumpster there. That was there before I started, before I bought the property in 2016. It was used as a small office dumpster for the existing, for the previous owners, and we kept it on site. It is considered the largest garbage receptacle that you can have in a residential location. They come with the back tip garbage can and tip it up once a week, so it's a weekly removal of garbage. I would prefer to keep that. It is more economical to have something small like that, and it's been on site for more than 5 years.
Doesn't sound like it's a problem to me.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like it's fun.
Sorry, Malcolm, if I overstepped my authority here.
No, we want to get a consensus here, so thank you.
Thanks for not believing me, Pedro.
Okay, number 5, minimize the glare from headlights, minimize light glare into the night sky, and minimize overspill into adjacent properties.
All right, so in this one, we've talked about having vegetative screening. They want to propose a fence there. Is there a way to condition our site plan approval on a agreement between the neighbors? I mean, because if it were me, I don't know that I would want to see a fence up against my property. I'd rather have vegetation. But perhaps Mr. Souls doesn't mind a fence. I don't know. You know what I mean?
What can we do here, Chris? Can we have a condition that says the parking should be screened using a method that's acceptable to the neighbor, either fencing or vegetative?
It's a little bit difficult to leave it completely open. You could have, and I'm not calling Mr. Souls, difficult to deal with. I just want to say that if you leave it completely open, somebody could say, I want X, Y, and Z and all the bells and whistles. So you should at least say a fence compliant with the town's. Our fencing bylaws don't apply in MXT zones, but a fence compliant with bylaws, no higher than X, or a vegetated screen. And you could review this in 6 months if you want, ensure that some sort of agreement has been met and that everybody is happy. If you wanted to bring that particular item back to review to ensure some sort of satisfaction.
May I just add to that briefly?
Sure.
Thank you. We certainly wish to have a screen that's amenable both to us and Mr. Souls, no question. I think that the point Mr. Remble was raising here is in light of everything to avoid any conflicts going forward here, we just felt that the proposal of a solid fence, if there can be a separate agreement to soften the look of the fence facing Mr. Souls' property, that's a discussion that probably could happen offline and not be subject to review during the building permit process. But it would really be our preference to have any condition beyond there include a solid fence, so there's no question that whatever is there does not contain the light pollution.
Maybe it's both.
Yeah.
It very well could be, but I just think that at this point here, everyone is better served with a solid fence there.
In that case, yeah, Malcolm, I'd suggest you just go with
Yep.
the requirement to screen the parking.
Yep.
Fences shouldn't be in the setbacks if they're more than 6 feet. So if it's going to be 6 feet high, it's got to be at the setback line, but probably doesn't need to be 6 feet high.
On the property line. Anything above 6 feet is a structure.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, we would not be looking to exceed 6 feet.
yeah, I would say that they should do something between 4 and 6 feet. Leave it up to them.
Okay. Number
So, no, I'm sorry.
something to do with the glare? Headlight glare? No. Okay. Number 6, minimize unreasonable departure from the character, materials, and scale of buildings in the vicinity as viewed from public ways and places. I think that was the heart of much of the discussion, but I'm not. The only thing I have for sure that we discussed was the door on the west side of the building, that southwest side of the building should be eliminated. Was there anything else that falls under this category that we should consider?
Well, I'd like to just clarify something Mr. Souls brought up again about the garage door. And that's, I see his point, and all things being equal, it's a good point. But not having the garage door on the gable side of the house or of the shed kind of makes the shed not functional for a lot of the purposes that Mr. Hazelton needs the shed for, which is to store long things.
Well,
and to be able to hook them up
and replace the tools.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think I would lean more on the function side of this one.
You can't park trailers in there if you're coming in from the.
Yeah, you can't park trailers in it. You can't do any of that stuff. Yeah. So it would be a waste of money for Mr. Hazelton.
It seemed like a good suggestion, but I'm not sure it's practical for the use.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it is either.
So, it does there need to be some sort of screening there then? Because it is their front door, and I don't know what the windows look like on that side of on their house, but if it does look right into that.
Well, Well, I believe we've screened the entire frontage of the property with the proposed fruit trees along the Hayway Street. So I think that's how we're addressing that. Was there a different view you were explaining, Jeremy?
Yeah, the westerly between what's labeled as the porch on the western abutting property, that alignment with the kind of facing when the door to the shed is open.
Frankly, I think that's an area we may consider that fence extending further south.
Okay.
I guess if we could just maybe recommend, without including in the site plan approval, that they also discuss between the neighbors something that would be agreeable to them.
So recommend.
Some sort of screening. Yeah, I don't think I'm not comfortable, forcing them to do it. I think they can come to an agreement there.
A condition that the site plan at the time of a building permit application identifies an additional screen facing the porch of the western abutter. That gives us some flexibility.
We're not necessarily going to put that in condition. I think the suggestion is that we just recommend that you guys discuss that with.
I misunderstood. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Any other conditions?
It's not really scale of buildings, but what about the comment of the greenway along the northern strip of Mahawi? How it seems to align with the fronts of the buildings, and how the two northwestern spaces, closed spaces, are within that.
I'm not sure, Jenny. What?
So his comment was that the two spaces in the northwestern corner of the property or of the site.
I'll share the screen, Malcolm.
Yeah.
So the comment was referencing that in front. Can you see the cursor?
Mm-hmm.
In front of houses, this is a greenway.
Well, I think it's a little lower than that. If you line up more, below, not the
So these spaces are within this so-called greenway.
Yeah. Those two spaces.
You heard two spaces. You heard the applicant's comments about their parking needs, desire.
But
to keep
so
cars
I was just wondering. So they had talked about two spaces being their openness. They're not preference, but openness that two spaces be green pavers. And I was assuming it wasn't probably those two spaces, but I don't know if the applicant could comment on which two spaces they were thinking.
No, we were considering those two as the ones that we would consider possibly doing the grass on gravel or the grass pave.
And so does that mean those would be two of the spaces that would be used last?
Correct. So
that
it would still have the durable substructure to be able to support a vehicle parking on that.
Yep.
But it wouldn't count. It would not represent a reduction in our parking availability of off-street parking on the site, but it would help to soften the impacts of that. Give Mr. Hazelton the flexibility he needs to have the ability to park multiple vehicles potentially at one time, but try and address that comment as well. That's something we were happy to consider.
That seems like it's a good. I mean that seems like it's a good compromise.
But the reality is, I think that if he's going to actually be backing trailers into the shed, that those spaces will be used first. Because if you use the spaces to the south, you're going to have to move the cars in order to get into the shed.
No, really?
Well, admittedly, our parking requirements are only 5 spaces, so I think our preference is that the majority of the vehicles will be parked against the house, trying to leave the house open as much as possible, to Jonathan's point. So that really, again, this is intended to be, frankly, I would view those spaces on the west side really used more for the workers who are coming to the site to potentially load or unload a trailer. I think the preference would be the vehicles would be parked on the eastern side of that parking area.
Okay.
But it exists already, so we don't want to give that up. As we comply with our setback. But that's where. Thank you.
But what you're saying is that there's not going to be cars parked in those spaces regularly for extended periods of time. That the main.
I think that's a fair characterization of how those spaces will be used. Yes.
Okay. That it's mainly going to be the 5 spaces adjacent to the house.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else on number 6? Number 7, minimize contamination of groundwater from on-site wastewater disposal system or operations on the premises involving the use, storage, handling, or containment of hazardous substances. And I don't believe there's any proposal to handle any hazardous substances on site. And number 8 is ensure compliance with the provisions of the zoning bylaw, including parking and landscaping. Any comments on that? I wrote down 3 possible conditions. One would be no raw material stored in the setbacks. The second is the screening with a 4 to 6 foot fence on the west side of the parking there. And number 3 was the use of grass or grass pavers on the northern 2 spaces on the west side of the parking.
So I think that the grasscrete is not a good idea because, as Brian pointed out, every time you plow it, you're pulling them up. It's a mess, and you're sitting. And these are just 2 spaces on a large parking lot, so it's not like it's going to make it seem like it's fabulous or anything.
Anybody else have any opinions on this?
Yeah, those pavers that get destroyed. I don't know what to do about that. I'll comment on the first condition. If that condition is going to be included, then I would just change the language from raw materials to, anything. Because Jonathan brought up the idea of a pallet of stone. Well, we could also I don't think we'd like pallets, empty pallets, stored there. So maybe that language could be a little different.
Well, how about just materials stored in setback?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you cut out on my end.
Instead of raw materials, just drop the word raw.
Yes, great.
So, one of the things I liked about the idea about the grass pavers was that it just differentiated those spaces from the rest of the spaces. But if they're really not going to be used, if they're the ones that aren't going to be used much, then maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
if it's going to all get torn up the first winter anyway, then.
It's going to be uglier than having grass there if it's just a bunch of pavers that have to be there.
And the parking lot's not going to be lined, so it's going to be a gravel parking lot. So.
Okay. So what's the feeling of the board on this? So number 1, the no material stored in the setback. We have general agreement on that.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Number 2, the screening 4 to 6 foot fence on the west side of that western parking area.
Yeah.
And then we will. Is the consensus to include the grass or grass pavers or not?
Sounds like not.
No.
Wait to my.
Okay. Are there any other conditions that anyone would like to?
Pedro mentioned the door on the southwest, shown currently on the southwest elevation.
Right. So, no door on the west wall.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think just if Mr. Hazelton wants to appease Mr. Souls and just have a door on the east facade, I don't really see a difference functionally. But that's I don't know if I
don't think there's a
necessarily
problem with having it on the west side.
You know what?
I don't think it's a problem having it on the west side. I think, depending on what's in there, he may need access from the west side because he may not be able to get stuff because of scaffolding or something in there. And if we're not allowing him to place materials in there, then that could very well be a pathway to that door in the side yard.
Jonathan, what do you think is the impact on noise by having a door there?
Oh, 0.
Okay. I can't make that judgment, but okay. That was actually something I brought up too, and I'm not wedded to it.
I mean, they use the storage, so I mean, when things sit there, they don't really make noise, right?
Right.
Only when you're putting them away.
Yeah, there's no manufacturing going on.
Right.
Right.
And so do we not think it's important to condition any sort of along the, I mean, I'm thinking not, but along the western wall of the shed, but just to consider maybe some things like was talked about, because I know there's the hemlocks there, but it looks like they're only really shielding the back of the shed. And so your view from the street and from the abutter's property of that, you can really still see the whole, I don't know, it seems like you're going to be able to see along the western wall. So maybe just to consider what he was talking about. So I guess is it the carriage house in the Mission House in Stockbridge? It sounded like what that is, it's like a false facade to make it look more residential than the use.
I believe they came on and said that they could potentially talk and work with.
Yeah.
Mr. Souls brought it up. Mr. Hazelton came back and said that he's willing to talk.
Yeah, we can't enforce this, but I would encourage Mr. Hazelton. I think it was Mr. Hazelton who brought up the Stockbridge house, and
no, Mr. Soul.
Mr. Souls, okay, and I would recommend that that would be a good thing to do and go look at it and see if it is how you.
And I'd like to just say something off the record here, or off the cuff on the record.
Yeah, it's on the
that
record.
I for one, as a member of the board, sitting here for as long as I've been here, I appreciate the camaraderie between these two neighbors. I think that they both have dealt with this situation in a very amicable way, and I really appreciate their collaboration to get to satisfy each other's needs for this thing. I thought it was important to say something about that.
Thank you. I agree.
We need more neighborliness.
Okay. Any other comments or before we entertain a motion here?
So the two conditions.
I'm ready to entertain a motion. We have two conditions.
The two conditions. So I'll move to approve site plan review with the two conditions. One being that no materials be stored in the yards, in the setbacks, and two, that there be a 4 to 6 foot fence between the parking on the west side and the property line.
I'll second that.
Okay. Anthony made the motion and Pedro seconded. Jeremy, discussion?
And so that doesn't affect within the barn the part of the barn that's in the setback, but interior to the building, right? So we're just talking about stored in the yard, right? So the word yard was in there?
Jonathan, you said all setbacks. That's Jeremy's question.
So I'm just want to make sure that materials stored inside the barn that are in the rear setback are fine.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Uh,
No materials stored outside in the setbacks.
Yeah, outside.
I think the word outside should be in there.
Okay.
Good question. Good catch, Jeremy.
You can use the barn, just not the rear of the barn.
Can't store anything in the back 10 feet. Okay, we have a motion and it's seconded. And Jonathan, are you okay with that change?
Yeah, sure.
Pedro, you too?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So then we will do a roll call vote. Jonathan?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Pedro?
Aye.
And Malcolm, that's me. Aye.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good luck.
that order of business.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Randy, welcome back.
Come on back, Brandy.
Please.
Mhm.
Oh,
Look, she just woke up.
just reading the news. It's terrible. Should stop reading the news.
Oh no.
All right.
There's just so folks who are attending the meeting, there's 38 attendees still in the audience. Just FYI.
Sure, and just so the attendees are aware, our next item on our agenda is the special permit for 148 Maple Avenue. This is a continuation of the discussion with the Planning Board and Great Barrington Development LLC, care of John Halpern, P.O. Box 216, Southfield, Mass, for the conversion of a former nursing home at 148 Maple Ave to multifamily use, filed in accordance with sections 8.10 and 10.4 of the zoning bylaw. So I believe our first order of business is a vote to reopen the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do we have a second?
Second. Malcolm
seconded. Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Jeremy?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Aye.
Pedro?
Aye.
Gotta show some enthusiasm for opening that public hearing. Brandy? Aye. All right. So the applicant had deferred the last couple of meetings as they prepared some updated material. So I believe representatives of the applicant are present. It looks like we have Nick Elton, architect for the project, Sam Van Sant, who I believe is the contractor for the project, and Charlie Ferris, who is the attorney for the project.
Charlie or the team, if there are other folks that you need to speak, and we can find them in the attendees, we can promote them. So just let us know.
All right, thank you. I just want to present a very brief introduction, then we'll let Nick Elton and Sam talk about some changes to the project. There have been some significant changes which address both the community comments as well as some comments we received from the town regarding whether we met all the criteria applicable in the bylaw regarding the size of the project. But just backtrack a little bit. This is a 4.2 acre site. To remind you about, we are retaining the natural scenic conditions of the property and probably improving them with landscaping, but we're retaining about 2.5 acres of woodlands and 3/4 of an acre of landscaped area. So we believe that the project will not adversely impact any scenic views in the area. We're renovating, of course, a 50-year-old abandoned nursing home that's going to substantially improve the quality and safety of the structure The tenants there will be benefited by recreational facilities. The key points, again, we're increasing housing diversity in the town. Much of the developments in the town have been condominium developments, about which I'll be participating at a hearing later. And there's been sort of luxury housing, but there's, as the Berkshire Edge mentioned early on in this process, since 1990, they claim that only one permit was pulled for the creation of more than a larger than 4 rental unit structure. So we're increasing housing diversity. We're doing it and we're returning to a certain degree. The neighborhood is a residential neighborhood, and we're removing a commercial use and installing instead multifamily use in the area. It's a suitable place for slightly denser housing where we've got mass transit, we've got sidewalks that connect to the center of town. And with the municipal services are pretty much already there. We've been, have certificates from the town regarding water, sewer, etc. So that's just to backtrack on what we've discussed previously. As I said, there have been some significant changes. So what we heard from the town was some concern that we might not meet, that although the structure clearly met the height limitations and we thought that was sufficient, there was some concern that the upper story was a whole story, and therefore we were no longer a 2.5-story structure, and we were a 3-story structure. So some significant changes have been made to the building. And the other issues that were raised were traffic issues, parking issues, and landscaping. I think those, I reviewed my notes of the many comments we received from abutters, and they mostly fell into those categories. The building was 48 residential units, primarily 1-bedroom. What's happened now, because of the reduction in the upper floor, it's going to have much more of a family feel. There's going to be 30 units, mostly 2-bedroom. I think 2 1-bedroom and 2 3-bedrooms. And the 2 bedrooms will be some 1 floor and some duplex. So the reduction in the number of units substantially addresses parking. There were 50 parking spaces for 48 units, and we heard quite a bit of concern from the neighbors that there would be so many cars spilling out. They'd be spilling out onto the streets and blocking, etc. So now we have the same 50 spots for 30 residential units. And although there may be some units that have 2 cars, as there could have been when there were 1-bedroom units, there'll also be some units that have just 1 car. So in any event, I think that really takes the pressure off the parking area. I'm going to just briefly address landscaping, and I'm sure Nick will discuss it. He has plans, very detailed plans regarding landscaping, but one of the criteria in section 8.10 is that the parking area be screened. So I just want to point out that there is a dense, I believe it's rhododendrons, I don't have it in front of me, in front of parking area. There was a neighbor to the west that was concerned with screening. There are some trees there on the west side, and we're proposing about 10 to 12 arborvitae be planted to improve the screening. So that really, those are 2 of the 3 areas of concern. The other area that the board and the neighbors were concerned with was traffic. And so we did, at the request of the board, commission a traffic study that was submitted to the board. A couple of points to be made about the traffic analysis that we got from Fuss and O'Neill. we commissioned it before we realized that we were substantially reducing the size of the unit of the building. So the analysis is based on actually 48 residential units. And in fact, I think because we're at 30 residential units, I've spoken with the engineer at Fuss O'Neill. He said obviously there'll be less, significantly less traffic with that size of those number of units. But I just want to briefly summarize what the traffic study determined. Based on 48 units, he compared the prior use as a nursing home to the proposed use for the 48 multi-unit building, and he concluded that traffic activity with the proposed residential use is estimated to be slightly lower than the previous nursing home use. So, and that's with 48 units. So we believe that the slightly lower would be even more than slight. But so what he did was he took the trip generator manual. He calculated that there would be approximately the same number of entries and exit at peak morning and evening hours, but overall in a 24-hour period, he estimated a 12% decline in overall trips. That's one part of the analysis. Then he also, people were also concerned with safety issues, sight lines, intersections, that sort of thing. So the engineer, they analyzed two different criteria. One is stopping sight distance, and the other is intersection sight distance. So stopping sight distance is defined as the minimum distance to avoid an object 2 feet high, which is approximately the height of taillights at an intersection. And then the intersection sight distance is the minimum distance for vehicles to see each other at intersections. So if you look at the report that we submitted, he determined that there was ample sight distance, first of all. He said the minimum stopping sight distance for 40-mile-an-hour speed was 325 feet. And he determined that there was an actual stopping distance of approximately 1,000 feet. So there's significantly, sufficient stopping distance. With respect to the intersection sight distance, he estimated that a minimum requirement would be 400 to 425 feet at 40 miles an hour. And he found, depending on what corner and what direction you were looking, the intersection sight distance varied between 724 feet and 1,094 feet. So on both criteria, he saw absolutely no cause for concern or safety issues arising. The third thing that they tried to do was to do what was called a crash analysis, and that involved looking at motor vehicle accidents in the area over the last 3 years, 2018 to 20. And basically, he stated there was only one crash in that 3-year period. So he concluded that there was no indication of existing concerns, safety concerns or hazardous conditions in the area. So I think the traffic study should help the board, reach the conclusion that this project does not present traffic concerns. And I do also want to point out that under the new nursing home bylaw, in order for you to deny the project, you would need to conclude that there was a severe change to traffic conditions, not merely a change or something like that. So overall, I think we're well within the parameters that you would want to see for a project of this size. And recall also, of course, that it is on one of the busiest streets in Berkshire County. Probably it's on a main highway, and we don't believe that we are significantly increasing traffic. So I do want to reserve the right to come back and discuss all the criteria if we're getting to the point of resolving this evening, going over the 10.4 and the 8.10 criteria for the permit. But I think it would be best if I turn it over to Nick Elton and to Sam for them to discuss the actual makeup of the project and the significant changes and walk you through the new plans.
Before you do that, Charlie, I have a question about the traffic study.
Yeah.
It's dated February 18th, and nowhere in there does it indicate the number of units that they're calculating. So
we did, I think we submitted a corrected one to Chris. Probably I missed that the first time through. Chris, I think you could verify. I mean, it was even hard to find when he corrected it, but he did state that it was for 48 units. So I'll have to ask Chris for.
Okay.
Yes, 48 units.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Elton, are you prepared to go over what the revisions are for us?
Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Would you like
Yes,
Mr. Remble to put the plans on the screen?
I was hoping that Sam Van Sant could assist me because I am speaking to you from Sandusfield and sometimes there is a long lag on my internet.
Gotcha.
And I
is that acceptable?
To share.
Yep, please, Sam, go ahead.
Just give me a second, Sam. Make sure you can.
No problem.
I'm gonna, Nick and Sam, I gotta demote you and then promote you real quick. Okay, so Nick or Sam, you should have the ability to share your screen.
I do. Nick, do you want to start with the cover sheet?
Unmuting. Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to start with the cover sheet, please. Okay. As was stated earlier, the proposed new development is a proposal of 30 units. Actually, the numbers were slightly different from what Mr. Ferris indicated. There are 4 one-bedrooms, 15 two-bedroom flats, 9 two-bedroom duplexes, and 2 three-bedroom duplexes. As opposed to the previous proposal, the gross square footage of this is 38,922 square feet. Previously, we had approximately 44,300 square feet. And the FAR, which was previously 2.237, is now 0.218.
Do you mind just spelling out what FAR is for those who are not familiar?
Floor area ratio, which is the relative area of the footprint of this building relative to the size of the entire site.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, the floor area ratio is the area of all the levels of the building relative to the area of the site. There were previously there is currently 48 parking spaces on this site, and we will be proposing 50 parking spaces, of which 3 will be accessible to people, handicapped accessible. Can I have the L1, the site plan, please? Okay, it seems to cut off a bit of Maple Ave, but can everybody see that adequately? Okay, here we go. So this site plan is fundamentally unchanged, except for a few things that were either brought up. This is not the landscape plan, this is the site plan, that were brought up during the last meeting. I believe some members of the board asked that we develop, which was always the intention, was to develop the courtyard on the north side of the building. We have now done that with a permeable paving area that is surrounded by plantings on 3 sides. There are some built-in tables in there, and there are 2 barbecues, and the barbecues are in small 3-foot high block enclosures with gas fed to them directly. And I will say to you, because I've done this quite often, the gas is such that you turn it on and it will only stay on for 30 minutes, and then you have to turn it on again. And that avoids the situation that somebody leaves the gas-fired grill going after leaving. In addition to that, on the east side, in that sort of semicircular area next to parking space 28 and 35, we have added a community garden with 12 raised planting beds of differing sizes for the people that live in this building. All these planting beds are literally raised in a prefab wood carton that allows even people in wheelchairs to be able to use them. We are installing similar raised bed planters at Boswick Center, at Boswick Gardens. So again, to summarize what we did previously is the paved areas have been reduced by about 4%. So the permeable area is reduced by about 4%. We are making no additions to the building. The significant other changes that we've made from previously we had areaways on the west, south, and east sides. We continue to have areaways on those sides, but the east side, we have maintained the same size areaway. The west side, we have slightly reduced the areaways. And on the south side, where we had 2 larger ones, we've reduced both of them by about 50%. As we had previously suggested, this is unchanged. We are diverting a portion of the roadway more towards the south to accommodate the roadways and to not be passing so close to the existing building. Can I go on to the, does that answer? I'll go on, I'll keep presenting, and then at the end, people can ask questions.
Please.
Sam, may I have L4, please, this landscape plan?
Just a second, Nick. I'm getting there.
All right.
I think it's numbered AW800, is that right?
This is kind of like in real life when the easels just always fall down.
That is true.
It's the one that I more recently sent to you by email again, just to make sure you had it.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay. So much of the landscaping on this site plan is identical to the landscaping that we showed in the last round. The significant changes are, as I think Mr. Ferris mentioned at the beginning, on the west side, we are proposing to plant 11 6 to 7 foot arborvitae. So they will be 6 to 7 foot at the time of their planting. Arborvitae grow to a height of somewhere between 40 and 60 feet, unless they are otherwise pruned during the course of their growth. So this should grow into a very complete shielding. It goes along the entire west side of the building. We have also added 3 dogwood trees on the south side to correspond with the trees that were shown, but there was an oversight in the landscape plan, but they were shown in the perspectives. That's right, there's right there, and they will grow somewhere between 20 to 40 feet, depending upon the degree of sunlight. They actually grow slightly less in the sun than they do in the shade. And so it's expected that these might reach a maturity of about 30 feet. The other areas of landscaping are around on the rear north side of the building. We have a raised planting bed between the patio paved area of 9 feet in depth. That is so that the residents who are using the community patio will not be that close to the residents that live on the second level of this building. And because the grade there is very close, such that people would be able to look directly into their apartments. And there is also a ground cover to the east and west of that, paved area. As well, we have added some more mixed shrubs on the south side where we have reduced the amount of areaway, both on the southeast corner and on the southwest corner and northwest corners in front of the building. All the rest of the landscaping is what we had proposed before. There is no change. And I have, we have not changed the site lighting drawing. I'm happy to review it again, but since I've shown it to you before, I don't think I'll bring it up right now. Can I have A01, please? So previously, all the community spaces, which were a gym, a dog grooming station, a laundry, bicycle storage, and then storage bins for some of the residents, including a public men's and women's half bathroom and an office maintenance area, and the maintenance area in the upper northern side were all maintained from previously proposed designs. There was a mix of more 1-bedrooms on this floor before. We now are proposing to do 6 2-bedrooms on this floor, of which 1 will be a handicapped accessible unit, which is the one that's in unit 6. Again, as we did before, we have an entry into this building that's fully handicapped accessible on the south side that will allow you to access the rear of the elevator. We will be putting in an extra elevator stop on the existing elevator. And there is a stairway half level up and half level down and an open space in the entry. May I have A2, please? Oh, that's right. Okay, so this is what we call the first floor, but it is the second level of the building. It includes 8 2-bedrooms and 2 1-bedroom units. Again, the entry is the exact same as it was before. And we have the relative elevations, as you can see, shown on these drawings from the entries to the first floor. May I have A3, please? Okay, so this is what would be the equivalent to the existing top floor of the building. The proposed changes, the proposed building now will include 2 2-bedroom flats 1 one-bedroom flat, 9 two-bedroom, two-story units, and 2 two-story, three-bedroom units. So for instance, the units in the upper portion in the northern portion, 17, 18, 29, and 30 along the north side are all two-story units. Units 22, 24, and 25 on the north side in the middle of the building are two-story units. And then units 19 and 20 on the southwest corner are two-story units. And units 27 and 28 on the southeast corner are also two-story units. The rest are flats. Can I have A4, please? So this is the upper level of all of those units that are two-story units. In every situation, they have 2 bedrooms and a full handicapped adaptable bath as is required by code. And each unit has off of one of their bedrooms a deck area on the roof. We have tried to make it so that the decks don't look out directly onto Maple Ave or across the street. And the deck area will be restricted by a railing around it so the people that are on the decks will not easily be able to walk out on the roofs. As you may or may not know, the criteria are that this building needs to be a 2.5-story building, and the definition in your zoning code of a 2.5-story building is that the area of the floor of the half-story must be less than half the cubic volume of the floor below and must be housed under a sloped roof. And we have presented a full calculation here. We are significantly below that. We are doing the area below has a cubic footage of about 110,000 cubic feet. And the area of space that we have above that roof is about 45,000 cubic feet. So we are significantly less than that 50% threshold. May I have A7, please? So the photo in the upper right-hand corner obviously represents the existing building. And these are some perspectives of what we are proposing. So therefore, the 2 additions that are proposed on the southeast and southwest corners are shown. But it's important to notice where the parapet is of the existing building. And if you draw that across, you can see that we are really adding only a very small amount above the existing. The roof is a little bit lower, so it would be about where the about midline of where the windows are. And the same thing holds true on the other side. It will become, I hope, increasingly obvious when you see more of the perspectives. What we're trying to do is to break up the existing volume of the building, because I think that I don't want to make value judgments about the existing building. That's what we're trying to do. So we're also trying to raise the parapet a little bit in the central portion of the building over the entry. It is just a raised parapet with openings through it, daylight openings. And we are still proposing the same canopy entry at the handicap level. As you can see, the areaways are smaller than they were before because they previously went totally across the south side, except in the areas where was an entrance. Can I have A08, please? So these are other perspective views of the site. The photograph in the lower left-hand corner represents the southwest corner, as does the image directly next to it. And the perspective up above is pretty much from the parking lot or as you're approaching it from downtown. So you can see that we are proposing to change some of the siding in that area to bring it down over a portion of the brick. Again, just to break up the volumes a little bit. Again, I want to point out that there are sloped roofs on these. These slopes are approximately 1 1.25 in 12. They are in there to somewhat accommodate the headrooms that are required, but also to meet the criteria, which says that the roofs should be sloped. Can I have A09, please? So these are some additional views. One view is from the northeast, which you can see the similar photo. Again, that shows the additions more towards the rear of the building. The two that are on the east and west are shed roofs. The one that's in the middle portion is a gable roof, and we've done that so as to minimize the visibility of that roof from the street. It's set back already about 20 to 25 feet on the building, but by bringing it down, we felt that that would even reduce its visibility more. And I think that the street elevation shows the entire street elevation, which you hadn't seen before, which I think demonstrates that although we're keeping most of the building as it was before, we're trying to give it an appearance that is a bit different. Of course, we're here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Nick, are you doing anything to the brick? Because the brick looks like it's a different color than what's in the building. Are you using that brick, or are you changing it, or what are you doing?
No, we're not proposing to change it. You know, it's very funny to try to replicate brick in in SketchUp.
Yeah.
To get the color correct. It's not easy.
Right.
We're not intending to change the brick.
Then what's there?
All right, board members. So, Sam or Nick, was there anything else that you wanted to present to us as additional or revised information?
Not really, no. I do not have any other information.
Okay. So I'd like to go by virtue of board members and see if there are any questions for the applicant. Jeremy, do you have anything at this point?
Not at this point.
Okay. Malcolm, anything for you? You're muted, Malcolm, if you're trying to say something. Still muted.
We like him best that way.
Oh, no, he's permanently muted. All right, Malcolm, you work on that. We'll go to Jonathan.
The answer is no.
I don't have any questions. I think it's a great improvement. I like everything they've done.
Okay. Pedro, anything for you?
No, just I make a comment. It looks like some of the drawings and information that we saw in the presentation is different than what we received. So that's always disappointing.
Could I respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
That is correct. We did do some updating. We presented a package on Friday, which I believe the hard copies were delivered on Monday. This is not an excuse. This is just an explanation. I've actually been quite ill the last week or two. So I was delayed. And I did do some of the last, particularly on the perspectives, we did do some additional work. And the landscape plan, we also did some work. But I believe that Sam submitted the revised drawings last evening. I mean, I know that's late, but I understand that.
We have on file what you shared here. And I think what you shared here is not significantly different except for some additions to the landscaping plan and the addition of some perspective views.
No, I would disagree with that. We don't have any elevations of the new building, and we certainly I didn't see any of those renderings in our package. I think that is substantial.
Oh, really, Pedro? Because I see A7 in our packet. I have that up right now. But the other ones I didn't see. You're muted, Pedro, somehow.
Yeah, well, we don't have any of the views that he just showed us of the rear, of the top, of the roofs, of all that stuff. We don't have any of that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there.
Correct.
I did see A7 in the packet, but the other ones I did not. Okay. The way we try to function as a board is, when you came before us previously and presented information, we want to make sure that if we ask you to come back and provide additional information, that we're trying to be as proactive as possible in giving you our requests for additional information. And this packet looks primarily like it focused very heavily on revising the architectural, and I recognize that that's a significant effort on your part and appreciate the revised information. We did get the traffic study as well. By virtue of this special permit process, we also do site plan review, and I do believe we went through the site plan requirements back in, I think it was December when you presented initially. I didn't see that you provided any additional information pertaining to the site plan specifically around some of our questions about how the site plan was derived and the parking spaces and handicap accessibility and lighting. I'm just curious, are you working on that and we'll receive it at a previous date, or did that maybe just get overshadowed by the change in the architecturals?
I apologize if there were other. You're right. We concentrated on the architecturals, and I thought that the lighting plan addressed the lighting requirements. I thought I didn't get the sense that there was a significant difficulty with that.
So let me just have you then, they're still outstanding as far as I'm concerned for purposes of site plan review. We can get you a copy of the minutes from that meeting, and there's a pretty detailed list in there of additional items that we were looking for as it pertains to the site plan. So I just want to make sure that those don't fall off the radar, because they are important as far as our ability to make findings on things like pedestrian accessibility and handicap accessibility.
Right. One of those was the remoteness of the handicap spaces.
Which continue to be remote.
Right, which were not changed.
Okay, so if board members don't have any other...
No one asked me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I have many questions, actually.
Okay.
Just because I can't vote doesn't mean I can't ask
No, I apologize. My oversight. Sorry, Garfield. I should have asked for your input before I started my spiel. So please go ahead.
All right. Well, one of the ones while you guys were patting yourself on the back saying how you're improving more housing, I wanted to know if these 30 units are dropping down from 48, has that driven the cost up, and what are the costs of these units?
To be honest, we're still sort of assessing the construction cost, which is going to drive the rents. So I do foresee they're going to go up potentially a little bit, but we're trying to limit that as much as possible. So our sort of target rents at the moment would be $1,400 for 1 bedrooms, $2,300 for a 2 bedroom, $2,600 for a 2-bedroom duplex, and $3,200 for a 3-bedroom duplex.
All right. Well, I have to say, I can't say that I'm excited about the prices. They don't seem like they might even be in there for workforce folks. If you have a job around here in this town making $7, $8 an hour or whatever, I don't think you're going to be able to afford a $1,400 place. And $2,300 certainly is not even close to being something that's affordable for hardly anybody in this area that lives here now. So I'm not pleased about that. There's also some question about the handicap procedures now. I had some questions, but I have to redirect them. But I understand that the handicap people, at one point you were saying were going through the elevator, which you know is not possible. But when I read some of your reports, you're saying that these people are going to have to stay in the building until the firemen come in. There's special training for them. What is that special training? Are the people that have to stay in the building, are they going to be special trainers? Is there going to be someone to stay with them in that building, in that process, while everyone is leaving? They're sitting in there while the building is possibly burning down around them, and there's no way out except for them to wait till the fire company comes. And you always have to paint the worst scenario, because what if something happens? They're not going to be able to get there. So you're going to have, as far as I'm concerned, you're going to have to have a better escape plan than that. That doesn't seem I don't see how anybody would be comfortable knowing. I don't think yourself would be comfortable sitting in a burning building, knowing you're handicapped, waiting for someone to come and get you, and there's no way for you to. And I would think you would need some direct contact with the people that are going to be helping you or trying to get you out of that building. I'm very displeased with your answer as far as that goes. Someone staying in the building. I think someone.
May I respond?
Excuse me?
Sorry.
If they're going to have to stay, someone needs to be with them. They also need to be in direct contact with the people, I think, that are going to try to rescue them. And there was something about there's emergency lights and an exit system. Why can't the handicap folks use that? If that's the case, if you have an emergency exit. And also one other thing, I think all this information about how their fire halls or whatever, one's an hour, one's 2 hours, whatever. People need to know this. This needs to be right out there where they can find it without having to be a problem. They all need to be schooled in it. I think that's very important. If you're going to be sitting in a building while it's burning, you better know everything.
Garfield, a lot of that, though, is dictated by building code, and this building would need to be code compliant. So, things like areas of refuge for handicap access and egress and alarm systems and emergency lighting, that, I would
They haven't said what they were, Brandy. They haven't really spelled them out.
Well, I don't know
Well,
that
why
they
don't we let Mr. Elton respond to that? I think he can respond, if you don't mind, Brandy. Sorry.
Okay, so yes, we do have areas of refuge. However, there are currently one handicapped unit is shown on the garden level and one handicapped unit is shown on the first floor. I'm happy to show them to you again. And there is direct access to the outside on both of those levels. So if somebody should choose to go out, they can get out of the building directly on those two levels as a person in a wheelchair. That is a change that we've made from before. So there is no requirement that they use an elevator. There is an automatic fire alarm system in this building that will alarm them. And there is special accommodation made in the handicap units and at least 2 other units for people that might be sight or hearing impaired. The building is fully sprinkled. So in that respect, all the egress pathways. I'm sorry?
Will these things be posted? Will people know them? Will they be in their rooms? Will people be aware?
There will be signage in the building that when you come out of your unit, or if you're in the hallways, it will indicate you the closest and fastest 2 alternative paths of travel outside to get out of the building.
I hope you run maybe a test every once in a while, perhaps, to see how that works and see if it's working correctly.
I believe that, we've done many, many units of housing, and I believe that this is, there has only been in the entire history one person that has died in a sprinkle building. It really allows for a lot of time for people. Previously, what we had shown was we had some handicap units on the upper levels, which we do not anymore have. We have them all on levels that enter directly to the outside, exit directly to the outside. Emergency lighting is something that comes out automatically in these, in all the common hallways. And as is required by code, all the egress hallways have a 1 hour rating, and all the stairways have a 2 hour rating.
I did see that. I just wanted to make sure everyone else was aware of that too, that it resides in the building. I did read that.
We're happy to create a handbook for people that are residents.
I think you should. I think you should.
Garfield, do you have other comments about the project or the proposals that have been revised?
I do not, other than wondering if the dog grooming and the gym have caused the prices of the apartments to go higher.
Yeah, I think I've understood this, and maybe Sam can comment, but I understood this to be market rate, not necessarily low income.
That is correct. Our goal would be to keep the rents as modest as possible, but it's going to be driven by the economics, and by reducing the number of units, that's going to have a consequence. As I said, it is mainly going to be driven by the construction costs.
I understand that. I own a home and my mortgage is I'm just stating it. My mortgage was never $14,000.
I definitely understand what you're saying, for sure.
It was never that high.
And
I couldn't afford to live there.
Randy, I have a question that in my notes here that I missed. May I ask? Mr.
Yes,
Elton?
please.
Mr. Elton, during your presentation, you said you're not adding anything to the building, but your gross square footage is increasing. Can you clarify this for me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Perhaps I misstated that. We're not proposing to add any additions horizontally to the building. But as previously, we are proposing to add portions to the, in addition to the current 3 levels, to add a partial half level above that.
Okay.
All right. If board members don't have any other questions, this is a public hearing, and we have been presented with the revised information from the applicant. If individuals are interested in making any further comment on this application, please raise your hand, and Mr. Rembold will unmute you, and you can make your comment. So again, I just want to ask folks who are on the list there. So it looks like we do have one hand raised. Dr. Kinane?
Those of you who have called in by phone, I think to raise your hand, you press *9. So *9 if you're on the phone. If you're on the computer, you should see the button to raise your hand.
So I do see a couple of hands going up. We'll take them in the order that we see them. So Chris, I see Dr. Thomas Bernard Kinane.
You. I live across the road, 155. I did read with interest the traffic report, okay, and the comment as one of the busiest streets. And now the address, let me tell you, Silver Street is not 700 feet intersection from that. So the main problem is the flow down Silver Street and people coming on Silver Street. The speed is not obeyed at 40 miles an hour, never has been since I've lived there. It's not enforced. So the speed and the entry of traffic is still a big problem here. Now, you increase the number of bedrooms. I'll modestly give it to you that you haven't reduced the number of parking spaces and cars as much as you think you have. Also, that building was not used as much in the last few years. And comparing a fully occupied building in California, which this is compared to on the things, it's very different. So this building was modestly used. And indeed, it has been a pleasure to be there for the last few years since I obviously worked downtown in Boston. So traffic increasing back up again, you're not making the problem better. It was a problem beforehand. And for putting a building with families going in and out, you really do need traffic lights. And I know this is beyond the group of this, but you do need traffic lights on Silver. It's just silly that people in this type of building are going to be coming out the front and turning right in this case, and then turning down. There's problems afoot. They're going to the grocery store, and they're going to the grocery store. The people in the nursing home, we're not going to the grocery store. We're not going to the grocery store. So there's going to be a traffic flow problem that's not clear. And since I live right across the way, I do think that the height has been addressed by a technicality. And I think it still keeps the building out of context to the single family homes, which is what this is around here, this community. And I do respect that. So I do think it's still problematic from my point of view, both from a traffic point of view. And there will be more cars than they're estimating here. So I think a lot of the things have been overcome by technicalities. And I think my concerns still persist. And I do warrant the word mass transit, the access to mass transit. Yes, a bus. That's not Boston type mass transit here. This is very low end mass transit. Most people there are going to have cars. And those buses are not well used as somebody who lives across the street. So I do have, there's going to be a lot of cars here. So I have unchanged, you have not mitigated my concerns here.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. So we've got Mr. Mark Hockler.
Hi, it's actually Amanda Hockler. I guess I just must be signed in with Mark's name. So I actually have a couple of comments.
Do you mind just telling us your address?
Yep, it's 193 Maple Ave in Great Barrington.
Thank you.
So I believe that the members of our neighborhood have made a strong case against the proposed scale of the nursing home project. And while in appearance, it looks like we went from 48 units to 30, really, we just made more bedrooms. And I think Carol Purcell sent an email and she really highlighted to us the fact that we aren't really shrinking person-wise here. We shrunk the number of units. And then when Sam was presenting, I think we heard them say that we're going from this one parking space limit now to families that may have 2 units. So if you have 20 family units with 2 cars, that's 40 cars, leaves 10 cars for the other unit. That's your 50 spaces. We haven't heard about whether the dog grooming facility will be open to the public at all. And you'll also need public parking spaces there. It still doesn't address what happens Christmas time or people's birthdays when people want to have guests. I mean, I think we're still dealing with the exact same number of cars as we were before. In considering whether or not to issue the special permit for this project, I think we have to look at the first criteria, which was the scale of the proposal, whether in existing or in additions or new structures, is not more detrimental to the residential neighborhood than the existing or previous nursing home use. I think that our neighborhood has made a pretty good argument that if you hear testimony from abutters that this building has never been the bustling enterprise presented by the developer. I think that there's satellite imagery available, there's census data available that have confirmed that the nursing home really didn't have that many people. And I look at the traffic study and, you know, we all live on the street. And I think it's funny that we collected data with a piece of machinery that showed drivers their speed and flashed a warning to them when they were going over it. I mean, I feel like that's hardly a blind study of what our normal traffic conditions were. We conditioned drivers to obey the speed limit because we flashed when they didn't. I also think.
Can I just ask you a question about that? I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
So when the traffic study that was conducted, there was a piece of machinery that was out in front of the nursing home, and I assume that's how the traffic study was conducted. Is that not correct?
I don't believe so. I spend a lot of time on that road myself, and the town has a a feedback speed trailer that they install in various places around the town, kind of on a cycle, to give drivers a feedback on whether or not they're complying with the posted speed limit. And I do remember in the last couple of weeks, it has been right there on Maple Ave.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry, I made the assumption that that was part of the traffic study that the planning board was requiring. So in continuing, one of my other concerns is that when we were talking about access to sidewalks, we talked about how residents of this building would be served by existing sidewalks when heading to Main Street. But we had a lot of concern about how people would get down to the Big Y Plaza via Silver Street, and we talked about the detriment and danger involved in that. I also think that, you know, as a planning board, we also have to consider that we're a sister town in the school district. I go to the town meeting every year. I have kids in the district, and I'll tell you that a big point of contention is that the number of families in Great Barrington is starting to tip the scale in terms of the proportion that we pay for school costs. And so I wonder whether Stockbridge and West Stockbridge are building the number of rental units that house families that our town is considering, because I feel like if they're not continuing to increase rental units here, the house families, which is great. I think it's great. I think we need to house families, but I think if we're doing it disproportionately to the other towns, I think we're just going to have some angry voters come school budget voting time. And then the other thing I really want to bring to the planning board's attention is the fact that there was a Berkshire Record article written by Terry Cowgill that references the fact that until a few years ago, the zoning in our neighborhood was such that neither of the nursing homes constructed here were within the guidelines of the zoning bylaws, and that according to the bylaws of the time, they never should have been built. It was an oversight. And so given that fact that they never should have been here to begin with, and we have this special permit law that seeks to turn them into family housing, I really think that we need to consider a much smaller version of this project. And to say that if the developer doesn't feel like that's economically feasible for them, that maybe we pass on this project and wait for a different developer, or maybe wait for a time when the other two towns that we share school district with are making plans to build the number of rental units that Great Barrington is. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right, the next hand that I see raised is, did that just go away? The next hand that I see raised is phone number ending in 8739. I'm not sure who that is.
It's 2737. At least that's the one that just came through to us.
Your number is 8739?
I don't know what 8739 means.
Yeah, there's a phone number up on the screen. I'm just trying to get you to identify yourself, sir.
Yeah, this is Jeffrey Purcell, the son of Carol Purcell at 120 Maple Avenue, an immediate abutter to the proposed development at the former nursing home. I want to magnify the comments of Dr. Kenny and Amanda Hochler just now, because they point to something that perhaps can't be covered by the recently passed bylaw amendments, which is that we have a real quality of living issue with the plans that Mr. Ferris, Mr. Van Zandt, and Mr. Elton put forward this evening. We believe, as Amanda does, that there are as many people as the place can hold, not enough parking spaces, and far too much congestion coming in traffic. We think it's self-evident. We don't think the traffic study represents what's really going to happen with traffic. We don't think the number of places realistically reflects who will be living there. And just looking at rental patterns around the Northeast, so many of these 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom places are taken by couples so they can cover the rent, as Mr. Garfield recently showed us. And they each have a bedroom, and they share the common space, and they all have cars. And, you know, for people who live right next to it, as we do, or the others right across the street, like Dr. Kenny and Royce Jones and Linda Traficante and our other neighbors, we already know what that means because we live here. And we did see the scale of activity at the nursing home in the years before it went out of business. And I'm here to tell you, as someone who witnessed it on multiple occasions, there just wasn't that much going on there by virtue of the fact that there weren't very many people living there. So when Mr. Ferris claims that you must approve his project, at least from a standpoint of traffic, he's saying that the criterion is whether it severely disrupts. I'm here to just place it plaintively in front of you that severe is a relative term, and severe for us who live next to it is a very real consideration that perhaps a traffic study cannot address. And when Dr. Kenny across the street points out how many people would be going to the supermarket and turning left onto Silver Street, and when Amanda Huckler talks about how many people would be walking where there are no sidewalks, this is just sort of insane for those of us who live around here to contemplate. So with respect to your time and the attention that you're paying, I'd like to say to you that the technical arguments that Mr. Ferris and his colleagues have put forward really don't address the quality of living issues that we all know to exist. And we're appealing to you as a board to realize that even though they cannot be addressed completely technically by bylaw amendments, that they're real and they must be taken into consideration by those of us who live here. I can tell you without fear of contradiction that most people who know this nursing home from history are not eager to see a large apartment or large living space, no matter how it's divided up between 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom flats and duplexes, and all the problems that will result from that having been done. We think that this is a problem waiting to happen. It's an avoidable mistake, but once you guys approve it, it will be an irreversible mistake. And that Amanda Huckler is completely right that it has to be a smaller scale, otherwise it will fail on the merits. And this is to say nothing against the designers and builders who put a lot of hard work into figuring out how the apartments will be. But it is to say that we who live here know something that is not covered in your bylaws. With all possible respect, please reconsider this project. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any additional members of the public that wish to comment on this item? I see Mr. Ferris's hand raised. I don't know if you intend to have it raised.
Yes, I was going to respond to a couple of comments if that would be appropriate.
If you don't mind waiting, I do see a few more members of the public raising hands, so I'd rather do it comprehensively.
Absolutely.
Okay. I do see Michelle Shimon. I'm sorry, I don't think I pronounced that correctly.
Oh.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a couple questions.
This is my husband, Richard.
Hello, Richard.
I have a couple questions.
You're
Number
the abutters to the south, sir? Is that correct?
To the west.
To the
I'm the
west.
closest abutter that anybody can be to this project. Is this subsidized housing? I would like the answer later when it comes up. And then there's a couple other things, some cement slabs for power right in the front, probably not more than 100 feet from my house. I'd like to know more about that. And in one of these papers that I went through this morning had an 8-foot grade. What that means, I don't know. But I don't understand how you get into this building flat because when you go in now, you go up 6 or 8 steps. And then you've got what I call the cellar in there. And the windows in the bottom are on the ceiling, up to the ceiling. And they're being shown on the outside. They're not being shown now. They're in window wells. I don't understand how that's going to all happen. And then I got a question about the pitch and the water runoff of these new roofs up on top. That's where I will leave it.
Could you expand a little bit on what your question is about the roof runoff? Are you asking where does that roof runoff go?
It's pitched right to my house, right to my side. If it were there now, it'd land on the deck of the nursing home. Where's all that water going to go if it's there?
Okay, thank you for your questions. We'll have the applicant answer them in just a few minutes. Just like to see if there are any other questions from members of the public. I see an additional hand raised. It's Neil.
Good evening. Neil Elms. I live over on Stanley Drive, and I just had a quick question for the applicants as well as if they could just reiterate what the size of the units are.
Could you just say that again? I'm sorry, sir. You sounded like you're a little bit underwater.
Sorry, can the applicant just reiterate what the size of the 3 different types of units are? We got a quick glimpse of them when they were going through it, but if they could just tell us exactly how big a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom apartment really are, that'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other members of the public that have questions? I'll just ask one more time. Any other members of the public that have questions? If not, I'm going to ask Mr. Ferris and Mr. Elton, Mr. Van Zandt to provide some response.
Thank you. I'm not muted, right?
You are not muted.
All right. A couple of concepts are coming up. Primarily, the scale of the project. The concern is that it's too large for the neighborhood. So we have a building here, and it sounds to me like the neighbors would like it torn down. I think the import of the bylaw is to make use of an existing structure, in a manner which is useful to the town to provide housing. And so, I mean, the size of the building is what is there and what has been there for 50 years. And so in that sense, that aspect of the scale is not really increasing in any material manner. The other point that I wanted to, point out to people, they have luckily or happily been living next to a failing business. So it's not proper to compare, for purpose of analyzing traffic impact. I believe the proper thing for the board to consider, and for the neighbors for that matter to consider, is this is a nursing home that failed. The operators of this business threw in the towel. They couldn't cut it. It's done. They would be perfectly able to turn it around and sell it to somebody else who wanted to have a large nursing home there, in which case the neighbors would be living next to a structure completely permitted. They have no input to it, that had 40 employees every 8 hours coming and going, that had people visiting the large number of beds. So for the neighbors to say, we like it the way it was, but we can't, it's not going to stay the way it was. It's a failing business. The owners have thrown in the towel and they're selling. We have come forward with a proposal which returns the use as they put to residential, as the neighbors have pointed out. It may not have actually appropriately been built there, and somehow it got built without a permit long ago. Again, I want to point out that for the traffic comparison is to what it should be is, what if somebody has an ongoing working nursing home there? And that's what is the appropriate analysis. Just a couple of other questions. I think there was asked if there was going to be a public dog grooming there. No, that's just for for residents. We're not opening a business there. And although it is pointed out that people frequently speed in that vicinity, I would remind you that the sight distances are double and triple what the traffic engineer determined to be safe sight distances. So we understand that on a main road, people are exceeding the 40-mile speed limit, but there is a tremendous margin of safety. It's not a razor thin margin. And as to the number of people in the building, it seems like some people are saying they don't want families because it's going to increase our school tax burden. I don't think that's appropriate for us to be attempting to restrict young people and families from coming into our community. I think actually a lot of people would like it if we were more family friendly rather than less. But with respect to the parking, again, for those units that people move kids in, the kids don't drive. I think there'll be plenty of people who, even a single person takes a 2-bedroom apartment and makes it into a one room as a home office, as that trend is continuing these days. So I believe it's reasonable to conclude that there will be fewer cars than would be in a 48 unit building. Let me just look at some of the other comments. It's not a subsidized, there's no subsidy coming to the developers. There was a question about some concrete platform or something. I'll let Nick respond to that. I know there's a transformer platform somewhere that's being added, but that's going to be surrounded by densely surrounded by yews. So I think that's all I can answer at this point. Nick, if you had notes of any other questions you wanted to respond to, or Sam.
Yes, I'm fully prepared to discuss some of the items. I'm only going to try to address the items that are architecturally related or site related. I think there was a question about what the proposed sizes of the units are. The one bedroom units will range from 604 square feet to 635. The 2-bedroom flats are 794 to 856 square feet. There are two 2-bedroom handicap units that are 968 square feet. There are 2-bedroom duplexes that range in size from 888 square feet to 1,015 square feet. And the 3-bedroom duplex units will range from 1,170 square feet to 1,234 square feet. These are net square feet inside the unit, not gross. There was a question about concrete slabs. As Mr. Ferris pointed out, there is a proposed electrical transformer, because the current transformer for the building is a pole mount transformer on the street. And the electric company has determined that to meet the service requirements for this building, we would have to put a transformer. The approximate size of that slab is approximately 5 foot by 7 feet. It is a prefabricated slab supplied by the utility company, and we are proposing to shield it currently with bushes on the east, west, and south side. And we are more than willing to accommodate more than that if that's a concern. In terms of the grade, I think we've tried to explain that previously. The grade in front of this building is almost identically halfway between the current basement and first floor of the building. So we are taking advantage of that. Instead of going up a set of stairs, we are entering at that midpoint between the two sets of stairs and changing those stairs to inside the building so that we can accommodate the elevator so that somebody in a wheelchair would be able to go up or down. And that is why we're doing it. There was not previously a totally legal handicapped entrance into this building. And under any circumstance, the primary entrance into a multifamily building is supposed to be the handicapped accessible entry on the front and visible to the street. In reference to the roof runoff, a very good question, by the way. We are proposing on that very gently sloped roofs that are facing towards the exterior of the building to put rain diverters on most of the roof that will divert the water back onto the flat roof. And at the very lower edge, we are proposing to put a gutter that again will divert the water back onto the flat roof. All the storm water off of this building is proposed to be handled by roof drains, which is the way that it is currently handled. The square footage requirements or the amount of stormwater generated by this building will not be increased at all from what it is currently. I think that is the range of architectural questions. I think the other ones mostly had to do with traffic and number of parking spaces.
Randy, may I say something?
Yes.
I just wanted to correct Mr. Ferris because I'm the one who mentioned the dog grooming. My concern was not concerned whether you were running a business there. My concern was whether that was making the rent higher because that business is there. I wasn't concerned whether or not you're running a business or not.
Ms. Purcell also asked about whether or not the dog grooming was going to be a business and whether or not there might be additional traffic impacts from that.
That was Ms. Hockler.
Oh, was it Ms. Hockler? Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the Carol Purcell email.
I thought I understood it to be just a place to groom your dog.
That is correct. It seems to be becoming more typical to provide this for residents. It is a place for the residents to come down and be able to not have to wash their dog in their bathtub or out on the parking lot.
Or at Tractor Supply.
Yeah, or at Tractor Supply. Right.
Okay, thank
So
you.
is my comment not relevant? Or does that not need to be answered or no? I mean, I'll accept if it's not, but you haven't answered the question whether or not it's going to make the rent higher. That was my question.
I'm going to defer to Nick on that. My opinion would be that it's not a significant aspect of the total construction budget. It's more of an amenity that's to make the living there more desirable, but not significantly more expensive.
Yeah, it's not a major construction cost driver, but as Charlie said, it's really just to offer some amenities.
How about you go with that? Answer.
So I want to just point out, I think that this represents less than 1/40th of 1% of the value of the construction.
All right, thank you. I think that's, an amenity, we can all be subjective about whether or not we think amenities are worthwhile, but I don't think that that's something that this board is really going to pick at. I think, the question about whether or not it adds traffic to the site is definitely in our purview. So I do see that Jeffrey and Carol Purcell have hand raised. Were you wanting to ask an additional question, or is your hand up just accidentally?
We would like to ask an additional question.
Yes, please.
It has to do with the relativity that was mentioned before with regard to, for example, severity of traffic. And I'd just like to go back to, as Mr. Ferris was doing, backtracking to the original proposal. Their language is all couched in things that can be judged relatively by different people. So, for example, they say they're not going to make the property more detrimental than it was when it was a nursing home. They're not going to make the traffic won't severely affect the neighborhood. The use to which the property is put will be, and I quote, The property value impact of the proposed development is unlikely to be friendly to current property owners. Excuse me, I read the wrong comment. What I mean to say is the relativity of all the comments that derive from the bylaws that were changed last September is really something that anyone can make their mind about, their own mind up about. There are no numbers about the number of cars that may or may not come out of the parking lot, no numbers that address the size of a small apartment for a certain amount of money per month, and no wishful thinking about who might or might not rent those apartments in the coming years, assuming that it's built, means anything if the quality of living of us who live next to it isn't also addressed, because that has to be included simply as a result of an existing neighborhood that would undergo a very large change. So the reason I'm responding this way is because most of the abutters know these points of view well, and they simply haven't been and perhaps can't be addressed from a technical standpoint, the standpoint that's enumerated in the bylaws that Mr. Ferris has correctly cited. So we have a quality of living problem. It's as if two different realities are being discussed here. One is the reality of whether there's a tight adherence to these new standards, which Amanda Hochler brought up some minutes ago, and whether or not we should be even talking about something this big. And to Mr. Ferris in particular, the scale of the building is not the issue. It's the number of people and the number of vehicles and the amount of traffic and nuisance value that's associated with it. So let's try not to misstate what's really at stake here. Of course, we would like something good to happen in this very large and probably usable building that's in our midst. But that's not the same as to say that it should be this project at this scale with these parameters. And thank you for your time again.
Thank you. All right. Are there any additional members of the public who wish to speak on this matter? All right. So let's see. Does the board have any other questions that they wish to ask of the applicant at this point in time? I'm trying to decide whether or not we want to just revisit the items from our December 10th meeting, have the applicant revisit that list. But if there's anything else we want the board or the applicant to consider as far as additional responses, I think we should discuss that now. I for one am concerned about the fact that this board has made a conscious decision and put a zoning bylaw forward at town meeting, which was passed and now has been approved by the AG's office, specifically to facilitate the beneficial reuse of this structure. I don't want to see another Searle School. I am concerned about vacant buildings in our town, and I think we need to find a solution to prevent buildings from becoming dilapidated eyesores. And so I'm pleased that there's a proposal under this new zoning bylaw, again, which was passed at town meeting. And so I think we need to move in a direction of beneficially reusing this structure. I understand the neighbors are concerned about traffic, and this is why we asked for some traffic feedback. We do have to recognize, though, that this property does enter and exit onto a state highway, which is among the highest volume roadways in our community, and therefore can sustain more traffic than some of the adjacent local roadways. So I still have some questions pertaining to the site plan that I'd like to see answered, but I'd like to know if any of the board members have anything else that they would like addressed in terms of our special permit criteria, which are whether or not, we'll just run through them real quickly, the social, economic, or community needs that are being served by this proposal, traffic flow and safety, including parking and loading, adequacy of utilities, neighborhood character and social structure, impacts to the natural environment. and fiscal impact, including to town services, tax base, and employment. Pedro, anything for you? Just go around the horn. You are muted. Nothing?
Yeah, no, this proposal causes a lot of anxiety for me. Anybody who pays attention to what we do know that for the last 4 years, really, I've been working really hard to get more housing into Great Barrington. And I think that this proposal on its merits is a fantastic use of this building. But my anxiety just comes really with I don't really like to say that it's a question of character, but it's just directly at the architecture. Mr. Elton has the good fortune of having this building project, the Boswick Garden project, and another project on South Main that will basically be gateway projects into our town that will all be kind of, and forgive me, Mr. Elton, for being critical of your work, but it's the work to me is just, I don't understand it. I don't know what its relationship is really to Great Barrington. Your current proposal right now is I mean, I can go into an architectural critique of it. From my point of view, it makes no sense. It causes me a lot of concern, and I just want to, at some point I needed to come out and say it, and I guess it's the right time to bring it about. I don't think it's appropriate for me to go into much more of a critique, but I have to say that it concerns me that these projects that are gateways into our town are the first buildings that people see when they drive into town, and I'm afraid that they reflect more of a suburban aesthetic than I am really hoping our town represents. When I moved here, I loved the uniqueness of our newer buildings, and I appreciated the historic nature of our historic buildings, and I appreciate the traditions of many of the buildings that dot not only Maple Avenue, but up and down Main Street. And this building, to me, just you see it in the suburbs, which are places that are really no place. So it just causes me a lot of anxiety. I'll just leave it at that.
All right, and I will just have us recall that in the minutes of our December 12th, 2020 meeting, this issue of character came up at that point too, and because we have to make a finding on character, we asked Mr. Elton to provide some information on how the facade meets the character of the neighborhood, and so I consider that request still needing some explanation, and I think that's consistent with what you're saying as well. Jonathan, anything for you?
Well, I just think that the character of the neighborhood that we are talking about is, in fact, this really ugly nursing home. That's the character of the neighborhood that you have to compare it to. And I think this is a huge improvement.
Okay. Anything else as far as development proposal or items pertaining to the special permit that you feel need to be addressed by the applicant?
No, I think the handicap parking we can do a site plan review.
Yes, and that too is in our minutes of the 10th. Okay. Jeremy, anything for you?
I mean, I don't know how it attains, but I mean, I do have some concerns with the prices of the units. Not that they're affordable, but if they really fall in that sweet spot of new market rate, to then possibly relieve some burden on the old stock market rate to make that available. But I just don't. So I guess this is more a question. I mean, I know they're going to review this and to see if it's feasible, that if there's really a market for these kind of prices, for the size and the prices is what I'm wondering. It's not that 3-bedroom necessarily, but 3-bedroom at 1,200 square feet. And anyways, I mean, that's some of my, and then I do have some concerns. I mean, I know it's been brought up about that Silver Street intersection. I think that I think there's a better walking way than that. Maybe down Mahawi, it's a little longer, but I do think that this seemingly, I don't know if it's noticeable because I don't think everyone's going to go to the store at the same time. But I do think that is a bad intersection now. But it's not really, that's not really a question for this proposal. It's more necessarily because I don't, in terms of the traffic that's going to be increased, like, is this proposal really going to cause a longer line of cars making a left turn going westbound, or southbound, westbound, left turn onto Silver Street? I don't know. I mean, you know, are all 30 apartments going to store at the same time? Doubtful. But I want to echo some of Pedro's statements about, you know, that these are the kinds of concerns that are coming up with this. Is any sort of market rate housing, rental housing development that's going to come up in town are going to face these same kinds of things unless we put it out away from the center of town, out in some field that has no neighbors. And then it causes a whole host of other problems being outside of town services. And so it is a difficult question. And I don't know if it's germane to this, but it seems like we're going to have to answer, or more importantly, prospective developers are going to have to answer this question each time they come before the board, unless somehow the town undertakes this conversation with the residents, and we can, so that residents of the town can understand what the town's real need for housing, for the future prosperity of our town is.
I mean, we know we need housing. We talk about it all the time.
Well,
we need housing at every.
We know we need housing, but I
Well-
don't know if the town knows we need housing, and that's kind of my point.
I'd be surprised. I mean, we've been having robust conversations about this since we did a master plan, and much more robust conversations in the last couple of years when we've had some development proposals. So I understand people are concerned about growth in the community, but we really want growth in the center, just like you were saying. We don't want to push growth out into the far reaches of the community. We want to be able to take advantage of municipal utilities and sidewalk infrastructure and things like that. So, okay, so it sounds like your concerns are still around the economics and community character piece, Jeremy?
Yes.
I'm trying to drive at, do we need to ask the applicant to provide us anything specific to help us make the findings pertaining to special permit?
Well, I think, I mean, and this is a general statement just to any applicant that comes before the board with something like this. It's just, I don't think the applicants are make the case well enough to the public, like the public at large. It's usually just, we just see abutters come to this. I mean, I was happy to see someone from Stanley Drive, which is more on somewhere outside of the abutters. But you know, I mean, we tend to just see abutters or some of the normal people that always attend meetings in town. And I just think, just for, you know, because we're seeing some of the same people, and so just in the future, I think, you know, it's like, how do these conversations get bigger? Because, you know, it's yes, the direct impacts are to the neighborhood, but the benefits, you know, are really to the town. And so how can we reconcile those two?
I think that's a little bit more of an esoteric question that we can't answer with this application.
Well, I know, but it's sort of the thing that the developers have to sort of,
right.
You know, anyway.
All right. Let me just see if Malcolm, anything for you?
First of all, there was a question that was asked that wasn't answered. Is this subsidized housing?
That, I believe that was answered.
Was it answered?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Well, that must have slipped right through my ears.
And the answer was no.
Right. That's what I assumed. Second of all, you know, I'm hearing a lot of concern about the rents, the potential rents in this property. I'd look at it from another standpoint. Here we have a builder that's going to invest in a property, and for 30 units, the best price he can give us is maybe $1,400 to $300 a month, or $3,000 a month. And if that's the best price he can get, that says something about how much it costs to build, not how much he's charging. And I think the fact is, we can't, you know, unless it's we haven't built anything except subsidized housing in this town, except for right downtown. And I think the bottom line is, I have a lot of sympathy for the changes that are taking place and how that's going to impact, or how the neighbors feel it's going to impact them. But I would ask them to consider 5 years from now, if this is an abandoned structure that's leaking with broken windows, like Housatonic School or like Searle School, you know, how are we going to, you know, who's going to buy it then? And I don't think anybody is. So I'm not saying that this is the best project that we can get, but it's the project that we have to evaluate. And I think we just have to go on from there. I do not have any additional questions for the applicant.
Okay. Again, I'm trying to drive at, do we want any additional information from the applicant for purposes of helping make our special permit determination?
May I say something?
You're next on my list, Gar.
Okay.
Okay. What's up?
I just wanted to reiterate what you said and some of what Malcolm said, in the fact that, yes, we do indeed need housing in this town, but we're going to build them and they're going to cost $1,400 or $3,000. What we're doing is putting out the people that we're trying to keep here, which is the residents and the locals of Great Barrington. They're not going to be able to afford to live here. And great that we have a place. It's great that we're not letting a building go to seed, if you will. But let me tell you, you got to know it. It's not affordable. And I'm not saying it has to be affordable.
I'm not saying it is.
That's not but Malcolm, just the fact that we're building, that's terrific, great, lovely. If no one can afford to live in it, the people that want to be here, then what good is it? It's counterproductive. Great, we're filling a hole, but we're not making it affordable for the people that live in Great Barrington. You're missing the point that really bothers me. Everyone thinks we got to do this, and that it doesn't matter how much it costs, as long as we're filling a building. Nonsense, man. People have to live here, and they don't make that much money to live in this town, Malcolm. I disagree with you.
Garfield, we disagree on that. So
yes, we can agree to disagree. That's fine. I don't mind that.
I am sympathetic, though, to the very real cost to renovate a building. It's not inexpensive, and since the pandemic, the cost of building materials have gone up very significantly. And so, I think developers tend to get skewered for, taking advantage economically. But I think we have to factor in and consider that the materials to renovate what is currently a nursing home, go in and demolish everything, put in new energy efficient windows, change the envelope, partition up the building differently. I mean, a 2x4, I don't know, Sam, what did it used to cost? $3 and now it's $12? I mean, it's crazy the way costs have increased. So I
Maybe
think
need
we
new
should,
ways to incentivize the talent. Maybe we need ways to have a developer come in who's not going to. Maybe we can incentivize them to maybe they don't have to pay what taxes for a year or something. Give them a break so it makes it possible. We don't always have to think that. I disagree. I think we should be different ways to incentivize the people that are building and not be okay. Great, it costs a ton of money. I don't doubt that, and of course, but that doesn't make it okay. And I think there should be different ways to do it, different ways that we can incentivize people to build instead of saying, oh, this builder's not going to want to build anything here because it's not going to make any money. Well, let's make it so he can make some money, but he doesn't have to, so everyone else can also live here. I don't have the answers, but I don't think I like the answers I'm hearing.
Sure, yeah. I'm curious if there's anything amongst the items pertaining to our special permit determination, Garfield, that you feel like we need more information on.
Not at the moment.
Okay, great. So with that, Nick and team, can you guys please take a look at the minutes from December 10th, 2020? We had tried in the last half of the minutes pertaining to your application to sort of concisely list out the items that we're requesting additional information on.
We will do so.
Yeah, and among those items, I didn't hear anything tonight. I believe all the items from tonight are still reiterated or still are addressed by the comments from the December 10th meeting. And since we do have to do site plan review for this application, even though it's an existing building with limited number of site plan changes, if you could please take a look at our 10.5 criteria and just make sure that you're addressing those items as well. And I think adequacy of utilities, you've already provided us information on. And the photometric plan, I just will say again that plan we had some questions about the mounting height of the lights. There is a specific requirement in the 8.10 for a maximum mounting height, and it's not clear to me from the current photometric plan that the parking lot lights that are proposed meet that requirement. They appear to be mounted at 16 feet, and I believe our code says 14 feet. So if you could please.
I just want to, first of all, apologize for not addressing everything that you were looking for. I do want to point out that Nick had a Herculean task to basically redesign the building.
I know, and I understand that.
And so I do want to point that out. The one thing that I'm at a loss to address is how we submit evidence regarding character of the neighborhood. I mean, are we supposed to run around and take photos of other buildings and compare this design? I mean, we're wading into an aesthetic opinion area, and I don't know what I can bring to the table. I appreciate the comment that Jonathan made. We are dealing with a structure that monolithic brick building. And I guess the question is, have we improved or the character of the neighborhood? And I recognize that, as Pedro said, it's not the style that he would appreciate for the town. But again, I just point out that Nick is not starting with a blank slate and designing.
We do have several other examples in town. Aesthetic is very subjective, and I think if you ask any member on this board what their preference is for aesthetic, you'd get 6 different answers. But we do have several instances of existing masonry structures that have been renovated and had additions put on them. And so there are some examples in the community.
There's a building at the top of Railroad Street that
yeah,
moves
47
away from the brick facade, but it introduces a new material that is very complementary to not only the downtown, the old buildings downtown, but to the brick itself.
Right.
So there are ways to deal with it. It's just, and
Similar-
I agree with you, Mr. Ferris. I agree with you. We are getting into this situation, but this is a special permit and it's in there. I never talk about this stuff. And I think anybody who joins this meeting knows that I never do, because I just don't feel that it is the role of the planning board to do it. But in this case, we are the special permit granting authority. So, I feel, so one thing I feel strongly about on this application.
I appreciate it. I was just asking for if you had any thoughts to guide us into what we could bring to the table. That's all.
That's why I wanted to point out that we've got a couple of examples. I think there's also at least 1 or 2 mills, Jonathan, in Housatonic that have had similar additions and renovations using some complementary structures. Just one, Chris?
Yeah, did they actually add additions though?
I think they made facade changes. I feel like we had this same discussion at that point in time.
But the Must building did not have an
It was just a landscape wall, Brandon.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
Brandy, if I may, you brought up the lighting, and just from the 2 elevations that we do, or the 2 renders that we have, I noticed that the lights are installed above people's windows, and I guess I wanted to know if that's intentional, and if it isn't, that maybe Mr. Shelton can look into that.
Would you respond to that now, or?
No, I mean, if you'd like. It's just something I when I looked at your renderings, that's what, one thing that stuck out to me. But if I lived in one of those apartments, I'd have a light coming into my apartment.
There are ways to shield the lights so that they shine outward and not, and you can adjust it specifically for the condition, which was the intention. But we will take a closer look at that relative to the placement of them relative to the windows.
Just be sure to show those on your photometric then, Nick.
Yeah, I was just looking at the photometric plan, and there's no building mounted light included in that photometric plan. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your participation tonight, members of the public and the applicant. Charlie, do you guys have a sense of when you would be coming back? I know we've got we have a meeting on the 11th of March. Is that
The
right?
11th. Your meeting of the 25th of March should be reserved just for the
right.
zoning public
So
hearing.
it would either be the meeting of the 11th or our first meeting in April.
Well, I think we need to get in the 11th. I mean, we have some issues in our development process, and I'm hoping, Nick is the one who has to do the work, so some of the work that you're asking, so he's got to agree with me, but if we can't be in on the 25th, we've got to be in on the 11th.
I believe we can be in for the 11th, but
Okay.
I will make every effort, which really means that we have 1 week. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you could get us things a couple days in advance. Chris usually tries to send us out packets for the board by 2 or 3 days before the meeting. So that'd be, if you could get things to Chris on Monday the 8th, then he can send them to us on Tuesday the 9th.
Okay, I will make every effort. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So members of the public, we do have one additional application for the evening.
You'll have to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We need a motion to continue.
Continue the public hearing to 6 o'clock on the 11th.
So Jonathan made the motion.
Second.
So for discussion, so is it 6 o'clock, or so we do the start time of the meeting?
Yes.
Is that how we, okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to continue this hearing to the 11th of March at 6 p.m. Do we have any further discussion on it? If there's none, roll call vote. Jeremy?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Aye.
Pedro?
Aye.
Brandy? Aye.
Just for those of you in the audience and the applicant team and the planning board, I don't think there will be too many other items on the agenda for the 11th. So this will probably be closer to 6 o'clock than to 9 o'clock.
I have a question about site plan review. Is the clock ticking on that? Or we have 60 days?
It is, but you can ask the applicant to continue that, which, as you experienced with 17 Nahawi, sometimes it's useful to wait until after a special permit anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be best to wait till after the special permit.
If the special permit is granted, then it is a permitted use, and the applicant does not have the anxiety of a looming denial.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So are we
Some
asking
details can wait.
to extend deadline for site plan review? Do we have to ask the applicant? I mean, when is the time running out? Should be the end of this month, right? Or is it already running?
I don't have it in front of me. So.
Yeah, I thought the applicant asked us to continue at least twice.
Yeah. So that should be continued as well.
Mr. Ferris, on behalf of your client, are you amenable to extending the timeline for site plan review?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Malcolm. All right. Procedurally, Jonathan, did I get it all?
I think so. I think you're spot on. It's a little late, but
Sorry about that, everyone.
Do we need a break, Brandy?
I would love a break, but I am concerned how much longer this is going to go. We're already at 9:40.
Okay.